Chapter 198. These look like eggshell fragments. Ah Xing carefully sized up the fragments and said after a moment of thought. Eggshell fragments? Zhou Wen carefully sized up the 6 fragments and indeed, they looked like the irregular shape of an eggshell after it shattered. Furthermore, the fragments were curved, making Zhou Wen even more certain that Ah Xing was right. There was a high chance that these fragments were the eggshells of the 6 chicks. But why did they bring the eggshells in front of me? Could it be that they want to treat me to eggshells? I can eat bird eggs, but I can't eat eggshells. Zhou Wen felt depressed and didn't care if they could understand him. He coughed lightly and said to them, "Thank you for your kind intentions, but I don't eat eggshells. It's best you keep these eggshells." It was unknown if they didn't understand him or if there was some other reason, but the 6 chicks stood in a row in front of Zhou Wen and stared at him as though they hadn't heard him. Seeing that they weren't moving, Zhou Wen knew that it wasn't a solution to continue this stalemate. Therefore, he picked up an eggshell and said, "I just want one. I'll take it back and slowly eat it." Zhou Wen pinched the eggshell and found it smooth and warm to the touch. It was like the legendary warm jade. If he hadn't seen these chicks before, no one would have imagined that it was an eggshell fragment. As Zhou Wen spoke, he placed the fragment into his pocket, hoping that he could bluff his way out of this. He never expected it to work. Seeing Zhou Wen take a fragment, the other 5 chicks ran back with their fragments in their mouth. Only the chick that had its fragment taken by Zhou Wen remained standing in its spot, looking at him in a daze. Zhou Wen finally heaved a sigh of relief. If these chicks insisted on making him eat the eggshell fragment now, Zhou Wen would have no choice but to fight to the death even though he knew he wasn't their match. He really couldn't eat it. I wonder what other tricks these chicks have up their sleeves? Just as Zhou Wen was pondering over it, he saw the huge bird on the charred wood spread its wings. Immediately, a hot wind swept up the trio like a tornado, lifting them into the air and throwing them out of the tree hole. The 3 of them felt like they were riding on a cloud. All they could see was a distorted golden light. When the terrifying force disappeared and the 3 of them fell to the ground, they realized that there was no longer a parasol tree in front of them. Instead, they were on a mountain path. There were still traces of a collision on the mountain path's guardrail. It was where they had parked their car. Li Xian looked around and didn't find any traces of the giant bird. He couldn't help but exclaim in pleasant surprise, "We've returned to our original spot. That giant bird actually let us go." Zhou Wen was delighted as well, but when he suddenly heard a bird's cry, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He imagined that the giant bird was here again, but on careful thought, he felt that something was amiss. The bird's cry was clearly very young and didn't have any terrifying might. It wasn't the giant bird's cry, but more like a chick's. Zhou Wen looked down and saw a chick standing by his feet in a daze. It was looking at him with its head tilted. Why was this chick swept out as well? Zhou Wen was alarmed, but on second thought, he felt that it might not be a mistake by the giant bird. Previously, when the 6 chicks had brought the fragments for Zhou Wen to take, he found it odd. Back then, he hadn't thought too much about it, but now that he suddenly saw a chick being sent out, he had many thoughts. Could it be that I was actually choosing these chicks when I took the fragments? Would the chick I chose leave with me? If that's the case, what would have happened if I had taken all 6? Zhou Wen reached out and picked up the chick. The chick didn't resist and allowed Zhou Wen to hold it in his palm. It tilted its head and stared at Zhou Wen with its round eyes. "Old Zhou, don't tell me the giant bird gave this chick to you? This isn't fair. We did the work together. Why are you the only one with a gift? Brother Sheng and I don't get anything?" Li Xian also saw the crux of the problem. "I still don't know if it's a blessing or a curse." Zhou Wen shook his head slightly as he held the chick and shouted in the direction of the mountains, "Divine bird, do you want me to take it away?" After shouting 3 times, there was no response. Zhou Wen had no choice but to take the chick with him. Without a car, the 3 of them could only walk. Although they could run very fast, to the point of not losing to a car, A human's body wasn't a machine after all. Their stamina was very limited. After running for a long time, no matter how strong a human was, they would exhaust their strength. And in the mountainous wilderness, especially near the Qinling Mountains, if they really ran out of strength, they would be in trouble if they encountered a few-dimensional creatures. The three of them didn't dare run too fast. They ran for a while and walked slowly for a while. Xing had originally planned on taking them to a dimensional zone near the Qinling Mountains, but due to the lack of a car and the lack of signal, he had no choice but to abandon his previous plan and rush to the next city as quickly as possible. Xing told Zhou that if they didn't arrive at the next city within the predetermined time, the Yin family would send a rescue team to search for them. Therefore, they had to contact the Yin family as soon as possible. The Qinling Mountains were just too mysterious. Although they were only near the Qinling Mountains and hadn't really entered, they had already seen many mysterious things. One night, Zhou and company heard immortal music coming from the Qinling Mountains. It was as though fairies were playing and dancing in the mountains. Although Zhou wanted to take a look, he knew that he couldn't take the risk. Along the way, they saw many plants that they had never seen before. There were mushrooms that were taller than buildings, grass that looked like humans, and all sorts of strange things. And this was only the periphery of the Qinling Mountains. Although they encountered many strange things along the way, nothing unexpected happened after encountering the giant bird. The three of them spent 3 days before finally passing through the Qinling Mountains and arriving at a small city. Xing contacted the Yin family and reported the situation in time, stopping the Yin family's rescue team that was about to set off. The original plan was to let you go to a few dimensional zones to train, but it's too late now. I've already contacted a plane. It will come to pick us up in a while and head straight to the Holy Land, Xing said to Zhou and Li Xian after the call. Zhou and Li Xian felt that it was best to head straight to the Holy Land to avoid any more trouble. After witnessing the terror of the giant bird, they didn't dare to casually walk in the wilderness. After resting for half a day, an armed helicopter came to pick them up and took them to a large city with an airport. Then, they took a plane to the Holy City. As many areas in the sky were enveloped by dimensional zones, planes couldn't fly freely. Most of the routes that had been used in the past could no longer be used. Only a few areas could be flown through. Now, the airport was taken over by the League government and the crew members were all military officers. Chapter 199. Holy City was the highest administrative center of the Federation. It was also the center of the world that humans had established after the dimensional storms. The reason it was named Holy City was that it was next to the Federation's Holy Land. Back then, the 6 Federation heroes had obtained powerful physiques in the Holy Land. With unparalleled strength, they were able to suppress their contemporaries and establish a stable regime, allowing humans to avoid many wars and disasters. Zhou and company arrived at Holy City. This was a new city built after the dimensional storms. The architectural style was different from the old cities like Guide City and Luoyang. It looked modern, and statues of the 6 heroes could be seen everywhere on the street. As heroes who had saved humanity from chaos and disaster, they received the highest honor of the Federation. All the Federation citizens would forever remember their names. However, this wasn't a good thing for Zhou. This was because the descendants of the 6 heroes might very well make life difficult for him. Ignoring the grudges between Tianzhua and the 6 hero families, just the grudge between Zhou and the Cape family would probably not be resolved peacefully. Xing had already booked a room and arranged for Zhou and Li Xian to stay. Only then did he begin contacting the various matters regarding entering the Holy Land. Choking with sobs, strange novel WWW. As they had been delayed in the Qinling Mountains for a few days, most of the other youths participating in the competition had arrived. Zhou and Li Xian were the last 2. Minister, Zhou has already arrived in Holy City and is staying at Goth Hotel. Liz's eyes shimmered as she clenched her fists. If Liz could tolerate having her primordial energy sea crippled, then Hardadef's humiliation made her wish she could immediately rush over and kill Zhou. I already know. With Ensheng by his side, and since they are nominally invited by the Federation to participate in the Holy Land trials, it's not appropriate for us to brazenly bring Zhou back. Let's do as we previously said. Contact the youths from the other families who are participating in the trials and get them to take care of Zhou in the Holy Land, Qiao Siyuan said. Minister, don't worry. Even if I don't do anything, the other families won't let Zhou off easily. Back then, Antianzhua crippled that generation of the 6 hero families. Zhou is here representing the An family. Everyone is rubbing their hands in glee. They want to cripple him just like Antianzhua did back then, Liz said. Zhou isn't a simple person. He was able to defeat John when he used Light of Judgment. Such strength is probably something that not many people in the 6 hero families can achieve. Besides, since the An family dares to send him here, they naturally have some confidence. It's best you contact the other families to act together to ensure that nothing goes wrong with this plan. Qiao Siyuan wasn't as optimistic as Liz. Don't worry, I've already contacted a few people who have a good relationship with my family to work with John. There won't be any problems, Liz said confidently. This is the Holy Land, not the An family's Luoyang. Zhou won't be able to escape this time. Qiao Siyuan nodded slightly and asked after a pause, Have you contacted Lance? No, he hasn't been seen recently. I have no idea where he went. I'm afraid he won't return until the day the Holy Land opens, Liz said. Try your best to contact him. If Lance takes action, it will be foolproof, Qiao Siyuan said. On his first visit to the Holy City, Li Xian went out shopping, claiming that he wanted to see how different the Holy City was from Luoyang. However, Zhou wasn't interested. He stayed in his room to game. Zhou used his phone's camera function to look at the bamboo blade and the eggshell fragment, but he didn't discover anything special. The 2 items couldn't be locked, so they naturally couldn't be stored in-game. Zhou had no choice but to place them in the Chaos Bead's space. He originally wanted to use the Chaos Bead's power to raise Chaos's first order to the legendary stage to see what kind of life providence he could obtain. However, the Chaos Bead didn't produce any light or text again. Zhou couldn't raise it even if he wanted to. The chick jumped around on the table. Zhou bought some fruits for it, but he didn't see it eat them. In the past few days, the chick hadn't eaten much or even drank much water. However, it didn't seem weak. It still looked energetic. Zhou originally wanted to grind a few dungeons to see if he could raise all his stats to 20, but the chick wasn't quiet at all. It jumped onto him and kept chirping. Zhou ignored it, but it even jumped onto Zhou's head and pecked at his head with its beak. What are you trying to do? Zhou took the chick off his head and asked gloomily. He originally imagined that he was playing the lute to a cow and that the chick wouldn't understand him at all, but to his surprise, the chick really understood him. It jumped onto the table and used its beak to flip open a magazine. When it flipped to a page, it pressed its claws on it. Zhou looked curiously and saw that the chick's claws were pressing on an advertisement. And the content of the advertisement was an auction of companion eggs. You want to eat this? Zhou asked the chick in shock. The chick could understand him as it immediately nodded. I don't have that. There's a legendary companion egg. Make do with it. Zhou took out a legendary companion egg and placed it in front of the chick. It was something he had found in the crappy car on the stone platform. Seeing the chick's look of disdain, Zhou added, I don't have the money to buy that rare epic companion egg for you. Don't even think about it. Make do with this one. If you don't eat it, you won't even get this one. Zhou lost any interest when he saw the many zeros on the starting price list. Even he didn't need such a good companion beast, yet the chick still wanted to eat it. It was a little too whimsical. The chick glared at Zhou before helplessly lowering its head to peck at the companion egg. It pecked at it from time to time, looking like it was very unwilling to eat it. Zhouwen had no choice. It was already quite painful for him to take out a legendary companion egg for it to eat. It was impossible for him to obtain an epic companion egg. After resting for 2 days, Sheng took them to the entrance of the Holy Land to register. When they arrived, many young people had already completed their registration. When Zhouwen went to register, the official in charge of the assessment said the words, Luoyang's and family. All the young people cast their gazes at Zhouwen. A few of them were even rubbing their palms together. John, who was standing in the crowd, stared coldly at Zhouwen as killing intent flashed in his eyes. Old Zhou, it looks like we are very popular. Li Xian also noticed that something was amiss, but he deliberately said the opposite. Chapter 200. It's indeed very popular. I'm just afraid that their enthusiasm will be unbearable, Zhouwen said indifferently. The Yin family actually didn't send in Jing. What's the meaning of finding an outsider? Are they afraid? A cold-looking black-robed youth said. The Yin family sure is smart. They didn't dare send their own people, so they found an outsider to vent our anger. Another handsome blonde youth also had a look of disdain. Apart from Tianzhua, it looks like the Yin family doesn't have anyone else. They actually found an outsider to enter the Holy Land. I feel sad for the Yin family. Zhouwen knew that he wouldn't have it easy this time just by looking at the number of youths speaking. Young Master One, if you don't wish to participate, it's not too late to back out now. Madam instructed you to act according to the circumstances. You can't force it, Sheng whispered to Zhouwen. Since I agreed to come, I can only give it a try even if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of flames. There's no reason for me to return now. Although Zhouwen made it sound nice, in fact, if it wasn't for the fact that the special physiques could raise his physical stats, he wouldn't have been willing to get involved in this mess. Of course, he had to return the favor. No matter what, he had to enter the Holy Land to take a look. Ignoring the mockery of those people, Zhouwen kept his gaze on the so-called Holy Land, hoping to find the tiny palm symbol. The so-called Holy Land was different from what Zhouwen had imagined. There were no magnificent ancient buildings, nor was it a paradise that looked like an immortal paradise. In a desolate desert, there was an ancient and dilapidated stone platform. The stone platform was hexagonal, and there was a stone pillar at each corner. The 6 stone pillars were engraved with different patterns. Even the carving techniques and styles were different, as though they were the work of 6 different craftsmen. Unfortunately, Zhouwen didn't see the tiny palm symbol after using Truth Listener to observe for a while. Shut up. This isn't a market. Whoever spouts nonsense will be disqualified. The official stopped the crowd with a cold voice and continued, I believe your family has already told you about the rules of the Holy Land before you came. However, I still have to repeat it. Everyone who enters the Holy Land is doing so voluntarily. If any accidents happen in the Holy Land, it has nothing to do with the organizers of this trial. In other words, even if you die in there, no one will have to take responsibility. With that said, the official looked at Zhouwen and continued, if anyone wishes to withdraw now, you can apply immediately. There's no need to enter the Holy Land. Once you enter the Holy Land, you have to be responsible for all your actions. You have to seek your own fortune. Everyone knew very well that the official's words were directed at Zhouwen. With so many people targeting him, Zhouwen probably wouldn't have an easy time after entering the Holy Land. The chances of him dying were much higher than others. Seeing that Zhouwen had no intention of withdrawing, the official continued, since no one withdraws, this year's holy battle will officially begin. In a while, the companion egg market will be opened. If anyone needs a companion egg, they can purchase it. In the next 24 hours, you can enter the Holy Land at any time. As for whether you can leave the Holy Land alive, it will depend on your luck. After the official said that, he got someone to open the trading market. Many merchants set up their stalls, and there were all sorts of companion eggs on them. They were basically at the legendary stage. Zhou saw a few brands he was familiar with. They were all famous companion egg retailers in the Federation. Young Master One, feel free to choose whatever companion egg you need. Madam has already prepared enough money. It should be enough to buy all the companion eggs you need, so you don't have to worry about money, Ashing said. There's no need. I'll just use my companion egg, Zhou said. Although the number of companion beasts a person could obtain was limitless, having a large number of companion beasts wasn't conducive to command. If companion beasts were to fight by themselves, it would be fine if they had high intelligence, but most companion beasts didn't have high intelligence. If they were to attack by themselves, they would be a mob. Not only would they not be able to play their intended role, they might even hinder each other. Therefore, most people would focus on training a few companion beasts. It was best if they could use them as they pleased. The companion beasts on Zhou were all ones he was familiar with. Furthermore, they were considered top-notch at the legendary stage, so it was enough. Madam is right. You really aren't willing to buy companion eggs. As Ashing spoke, he took out a box and handed it to Zhou. At the same time, he said solemnly, before she left, she specially instructed me to hand it to you. Madam said that you can choose not to accept the other companion eggs, but this was something she obtained from a dimensional zone in the past. She wants you to accept it no matter what. Otherwise, when you return, she will make you eat with her every day. She will even get Miss Jing to accompany you. Sis Lan, you're very thoughtful. Zhou didn't reject her and took the box. He didn't like the siblings, but he didn't reject Ouyang Lan. Since Ouyang Lan had said so, Zhou didn't reject her. When he opened the box, he saw a black companion egg the size of a fist. It looked like metal, but it also had the luster of jade. What companion egg is this? Zhou looked inside the box and saw no information card. Madam didn't tell me. She only said that you would know after you hatch it, Ashing said. Zhou nodded, but he didn't immediately hatch it. All he did was put it in his backpack before saying to Ashing, I'll accept the companion egg. I'll find a chance to hatch it in the future. Don't worry. Zhou had a Dao body, so he recovered his primordial energy extremely quickly. He could hatch a legendary companion egg at any time, so he didn't have to worry about the danger of expending too much primordial energy. Alright, now that your matters have been resolved, old Zhou, since you aren't buying companion eggs, accompany me to take a look. I don't have as many excellent grade companion eggs as you. This is a good opportunity. Who knows, I might be able to get a few excellent grade ones. Li Xian pulled Zhou towards the trading market. Li Xian's words weren't wishful thinking. In fact, as long as one had enough money, one could indeed buy rare legendary companion beasts here. In order to leave an impression on these youths who could lead the future of the era, the various companion beast merchants had taken out quite a number of rare excellent grade companion eggs. Zhou strolled around with Li Xian and couldn't help but be alarmed. He had never heard of many of the companion eggs here, but from the introductions, many of them had very useful abilities. They were in no way inferior to the mutated demonized general before it was synthesized. The companion eggs here were basically at that level, and the prices were astronomical. They were at least twice as expensive as the typical companion egg shop. Even so, there were still many youths who were preparing to enter the Holy Land. They spent large sums of money without batting an eyelid, as though they weren't spending money. Thunder God General. There's actually a Thunder God General here. Suddenly, a voice sounded, attracting many people to watch. Chapter 201. The three words Thunder Divine General seemed to have infinite magic power. Many young people were attracted by it. Zhou and company also went over to take a look. After all, a companion beast like Thunder God General was just too famous. It had the reputation of being the best offensive pet at the legendary stage. It had powerful offensive abilities, be it in its pet form or companion form. Thunder God General was most famous for his primordial energy skill, Thunder God Augmentation. He could use the void lightning to augment his body, bringing with him infinite lightning might to fight enemies. Every strike was accompanied by terrifying lightning powers, making it extremely terrifying. Furthermore, even when he was in his companion form, Thunder God Sword, Thunder God Augmentation could still be used. Even someone who hadn't cultivated a lightning elemental primordial energy skill could still produce a sword beam with lightning powers when using the Thunder God Sword. Thunder God General's reputation as the best offensive pet at the legendary stage wasn't for nothing. However, that was only if he had Thunder God Augmentation. However, Thunder God General had a total of 4 skills, so even if he hatched Thunder God General, he might not have Thunder God Augmentation. Without Thunder God Augmentation, Thunder God General was just an ordinary legendary companion beast. It had nothing to do with the best offensive pet at the legendary stage. Therefore, whether Thunder God General was worth anything depended on whether he had Thunder God Augmentation or not. Unfortunately, all the companion eggs sold here were companion eggs. Even if one had X-ray vision, it was impossible to tell the stats and skills of the companion beasts inside. Therefore, there were many onlookers, but none of them were willing to pay for it. The Thunder God General companion egg was priced at 2 million. This price to buy the best offensive pet at the legendary stage was definitely not considered expensive. However, if Thunder God General didn't have Thunder God Augmentation after it hatched, it would be worth about 100,000 at most. Spending 2 million on it was undoubtedly a waste. Therefore, many people were watching. The price was a little subtle. It made people want to buy it, but they also felt the pinch. They felt indignant to give it up. After all, Thunder God General companion eggs were very rare. Zhouwen pretended to take a picture with his phone and took a look at the Thunder God General companion egg stats. He realized that it was a dual-skill Thunder God General. One of its skills was Thunder God Augmentation. If it's General Thunder God with the Thunder God Primordial Energy Augmentation, 2 million would be worth it. I'm just afraid it's not. Spending 2 million on trash would be a huge loss. Li Xian was somewhat tempted. If I knew that it had the skill of Thunder God Augmentation, would it still be up to people like you to criticize it? The golden-haired youth curled his lips in disdain. Strange. Why would there be dogs barking in the holy city? Li Xian asked Zhouwen in surprise. Perhaps someone's dog wasn't tied up properly and ran out, Zhouwen added. The blond youth's expression immediately darkened, but he did not turn hostile. He only said coldly, "Are the people of the East District so uneducated? The upbringing of us from the East District is only left for the cultured," Li Xian said, unwilling to be outdone. "Very well, I won't bicker with you. When we enter the Holy Land, we'll settle the score," the blond youth said expressionlessly. "I'll accompany you to the end." After saying that, Li Xian ignored him. He looked at the Thunder God General companion egg and said to Zhouwen, "Unfortunately, Wang Lu isn't here. Otherwise, with her luck, she would definitely be able to get Thunder God Augmentation to help me buy it. It's only 2 million. It's not a huge sum for you. It's good to make a bet. If you win, you can get the best offensive pet at the legendary stage. That won't be something that can be bought with 2 million. Zhouwen secretly added fuel to the fire, hoping that Li Xian would buy the Thunder God General. He already had the banana fan and had picked up a bamboo blade. He didn't lack weapons. As for offensive pets, his mutated demonized general was in no way inferior to the Thunder God General, so there was no need to buy it. Alright, let's make the bet. Li Xian gritted his teeth and bought the Thunder God General companion egg under everyone's gaze. 2 million to buy a Thunder God General companion egg. There are so many ballers in a remote city. Someone mocked Li Xian. Although the Thunder God General companion egg was rare, the market price was only 4 to 500,000 due to the relatively low chance of dropping Thunder God Augmentation. 2 million was indeed too expensive, so no one bought it despite so many people looking. However, Li Xian didn't mind. He went to the other stalls with Zhou Wen and Ah Xing. He had brought quite a lot of wealth this time, so he wasn't stingy with money. He bought several legendary companion eggs in a row. You bought so many companion eggs. How do you have the time to incubate them? Zhou Wen frowned. If I can't incubate them outside, I'll bring them into the Holy Land. After all, we have to stay in the Holy Land for at least 10 days. There will be time when the time comes. Li Xian seemed to have a card up his sleeve, but he changed the topic and said, however, I'll be incubating that Thunder God General before entering the Holy Land. I'm just too curious. I wonder if he has the Thunder God augmentation skill. There were rooms prepared by the League government beside them. Li Xian and company requested a room and began incubating the Thunder God General companion egg. Zhou Wen already knew the outcome, so he wasn't too concerned. He sat down on the sofa in the living room and took out the companion egg that Ouyang Lan had prepared for him. He used his mysterious phone to take a look. Gold Armored Beast, Legendary Life Providence, Steel Guardian Strength, 19 Speed, 11 Constitution, 20 Primordial Energy, 12 Talent Skill, Tempered Steel Companion Form, Armor. Just by looking at its stats, one could tell that this companion beast was definitely an excellent grade legendary companion beast. Furthermore, it had extremely strong defense. It was very likely not inferior to the three-eyed golden warrior. Most importantly, the gold-armored beast's companion form was armor. This was clearly given to him by Ouyang Lan to protect his life. Li Xian ran out of the room with a gigantic sword surrounded by lightning and shouted excitedly, I hit it! I hit it! I never expected that I, Li Xian, would have such a day. Old Zhou, my Thunder God General has 2 skills. One of them is Thunder God Augmentation. Don't tell me you want the entire world to know that you have a real Thunder God General? Zhou Wen said speechlessly. So what? Although Li Xian said that, he quickly put away Thunder God General. Without anyone knowing, Thunder God General was an excellent trump card. The two of them made some preparations. After bidding Ah Xing farewell, they prepared to head to the Holy Land's entrance. Let's go later. We'll enter when the 24 hours are almost up. This way we can avoid meeting most people. They won't wait that long in order to vie for the qualifications, Ah Xing said. All right. Zhou Wen was very patient and wasn't in a rush. Although Li Xian didn't think much of it, he still waited patiently for Zhou Wen to join him. Zhou Wen had previously told Li Xian not to enter with him, lest he be hated by the youths of the 6 hero families. However, Li Xian didn't mind at all. He only said that since they came together, they naturally had to enter together. Chapter 202. The way he entered the Holy Land made Zhou Wen doubt life. He and Li Xian stood on a stone pillar that descended like an elevator. Zhou Wen originally imagined that the Holy Land was underground, but when the stone pillar descended to an unknown depth, Zhou Wen suddenly felt nothing beneath his feet. Then, he realized that he was in the air. There were misty white clouds around him, and beneath his feet were mountains and rivers. How is this possible? I clearly sank underground just now. How did I end up in the air? Zhou Wen was alarmed as he sized up the land below. Soon, he realized that it wasn't the Holy City's territory. There were no mountains near the Holy City, but there were endless mountain ranges below. Li Xian didn't have the Godfiend Life Providence, nor did he have the ability to levitate. Therefore, he didn't size up his surroundings like Zhou Wen. He summoned a giant eagle pet and landed on its back. At the same time, he flew towards Zhou Wen and pulled him onto its back. Magical, right? This is the Holy Land, a holy place. No one knows where the Holy Land is, but it's definitely not underground, Li Xian said as he looked at the surrounding mountains and rivers. Which holy temple do you want to go to? Zhou Wen asked. I cultivate the invincible Khanate divine art. This primordial energy art corresponds to the Khanate infinite constitution. I want to go to the Khanate holy temple. Li Xian asked. The infamily probably got you to cultivate the sun strafe art, right? In that case, you should go to the sun god temple, but your primordial energy doesn't look like it's the sun strafe art. I haven't cultivated the sun strafe art, so it doesn't matter where I go. Since you are going to the Khanate Holy Temple, I'll try my luck elsewhere. Zhou naturally wasn't willing to vie with Li Xian for the opportunity. Every physique would only choose one person. If Zhou were to snatch it, Li Xian would definitely be gone. All right, where shall we meet later? Li Xian asked. I haven't decided where to go for the time being. If there's nothing special, let's meet again after we leave. If Zhou wanted to snatch the special physique, he would probably have to fight the youths from the 6 hero families. He wasn't willing to involve Li Xian. In that case, I'll accompany you to find a suitable holy temple. After all, the test will last 10 days. It doesn't matter when we go. I'm in no rush, Li Xian said with a smile. Seeing that Li Xian insisted on joining him, Zhou had no choice but to say, then let's head to the Khanate Holy Temple to take a look. All right. Li Xian didn't stand on ceremony as he got the eagle to fly east. Not long after flying out, he saw more than 10 people riding flying mounts. Zhou still remembered the person in the lead. It was the Cape family's Saint John. Zhou, do you think you can escape this calamity just because you came in so late? Hardadef rode over on a flying lion and stared coldly at Zhou. As they spoke, the dozen or so people had already surrounded Zhou and Li Xian from all directions, making it difficult for the giant eagle to rush out. All it could do was constantly circle in the middle. John, if you want to fight again, I'll accompany you anytime. Zhou gave Li Xian a look. Li Xian immediately understood and controlled the giant eagle to land on the ground. Aren't you too naive to want to run? Hardadef sneered and gave the order. More than 10 companion beasts attacked at the same time. Without a word, Zhou summoned the banana fan and sent a grand wind at Hardadef. I wasn't prepared the last time, allowing a sinister villain like you to sneak up on me with a companion beast. This time, you won't have another chance. Hardadef was clearly prepared. Seeing Zhou's grand wind approaching, he wasn't anxious at all, nor did he have any intention of dodging. When the grand wind came in front of Hardadef, it seemed to encounter an invisible barrier. It spat out from both sides of Hardadef, failing to injure Hardadef and the lion beast he was sitting on. Zhou was slightly surprised as he found it odd, but he didn't have the time to think about the reason. The attacks of the other dozen or so companion beasts had already enveloped him, sealing off all his and Li Xian's paths of retreat. Zhou was just about to risk his life when he suddenly heard a young bird's chirp. It was the yellow-feathered chick. This fellow had been following Zhou and standing on his shoulder. At that moment, with its cry, more than half of the dozen or so flying pets suddenly lost control and flew around like kites with their strings cut. Zhou took a careful look and knew that it was definitely the work of the yellow-feathered chick. The companion beasts that flew around were all bird. Only a few, like Hardadef's flying lion, weren't affected. The other party's formation was in chaos. Although a few people still attacked, there was already an opening. Li Xian controlled the giant eagle to rush out of the encirclement and quickly landed on a nearby mountain. Chase. Hardadef gritted his teeth and chased after him. The dozen or so disciples of the 6 hero families also followed closely. Hardadef, are you really going to fight me to the death? Zhou stood on the giant eagle's back and asked Hardadef, who was chasing after him. You don't have to die. We are very fair. Back then, Tianzua injured someone from our family. Now that you are representing the family, we are very fair. We will only cripple your primordial energy and cripple you, Hardadef said coldly. Back then, Tianzua had already crippled your family once. Don't force me to do the same thing, Zhou said as he looked at the approaching Hardadef. Haha, do you really think you are Tianzua? You only represent the family. Your name isn't Tianzua. The pet you rely on is completely useless against me. What right do you have to be so arrogant in front of me? Hardedef held his sword and began condensing light of judgment. He was prepared to finish off Zhou and company in midair, not giving them a chance to escape to the ground. Zhou didn't say anything else. All he did was take out the bamboo blade. With one hand holding the scabbard and the other holding the hilt, he said to Li Xian behind him, "Leave first." Then, he leaped up and flew towards the charging Hardedef. "Old Zhou, what are you doing?" Li Xian was alarmed. He wanted to stop Zhou, but it was too late. Courting death. Hardedef knew that fighting in the sky without a flying mount was equivalent to sentencing him to death. Without any hesitation, he slashed out with the sword in his hand, transforming into a gigantic sword beam that slashed at the pouncing Zhou. The few youths behind him who weren't flying mounts also used their own primordial energy skills to attack Zhou together with Hardedef. Instantly, several beams of light crisscrossed, sealing off all of Zhou's possible paths. Ignoring the fact that he was in the air, it was probably difficult to dodge even on land. Chapter 203. Zhou, you won't be able to escape today. I'll return the humiliation you suffered at Sunset College with interest. Hardedef slashed down with the sword of judgment in his hand. More than 10 companion beasts also spewed out all sorts of light bullet. Together with the strength of more than 10 people, they surrounded Zhou in midair. It looked like Zhou had no chance of escaping. Zhou's expression was different as he constantly rose with bamboo blade in hand. At the instant the light of judgment and many attacks were about to land on him, Zhou exerted strength in his feet. As though he had stepped on an invisible staircase in the air, his speed increased explosively. Furthermore, he changed his trajectory and dodged Hardedef's light of judgment. In the next second, Hardedef and company thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Hardedef was right. Zhou was indeed unable to escape even if he had wings. Even a real bird probably wouldn't be able to escape the encirclement. Furthermore, Zhou didn't have wings on his back, but he moved in the air as though he was walking on flat ground. It was as though wherever he stepped, there was flat ground everywhere, allowing him to borrow strength at will. Zhou moved strangely in the sky, passing through Hardedef and company's encirclement in an impossible situation. Like a ghost, he charged in front of a young man riding a bird. The young man wasn't a weakling either. He drew his saber and slashed at Zhou, his powerful battle aura condensing into a corporeal saber beam. Zhou's body spun strangely like an eagle. As he dodged the attack, he brushed past the bird. The bamboo blade was instantly unsheathed and flashed like a cold beam of light. After Zhou rushed out a few meters, the bird on his back suddenly split into two as blood splattered across the sky. Instantly, Hardedef and company felt a chill run down their spines. It wasn't that they had never seen people with better movement techniques and saber techniques than Zhou's, but in the sky, he could fly freely without any external help. Such an ability was just too terrifying. Fighting such a person in the sky was no different from courting death. Unfortunately, they realized it too late. Zhou was like a ghost in the sky. As his figure flashed, he slashed out again and again with bamboo blade. His target wasn't those people, but their mount. Just as Hardedef had said, fighting in the sky without a mount was equivalent to dying. Those who relied on their mounts clearly couldn't be as agile as Zhou. It was difficult for them to dodge, so they watched helplessly as their mounts were killed. Blood filled the sky and broken feathers fell like snow. The young man who had his mount cut off screamed and fell to the ground. "Go back to the ground!" John shouted loudly, feeling extremely vexed. He originally thought that killing Zhou in midair was a foolproof plan, but who knew that it would become their greatest disadvantage? Ah! Screams came one after another. Some people fell on the rocks and their legs were broken. Only a few people with backup flying pets and flying equipment were able to survive. Thankfully, these fellows were from the 6 hero families. They were the descendants of the biggest wealthy families in the Federation. They had quite a number of good items on them, so none of them fell to their deaths. Only a few of them had been pulled over to make up the numbers, so the fall was rather tragic. Hardedef desperately controlled his flying lion to land on the ground, but Zhou was too agile in the sky. He managed to behead the flying lion with one strike. Hardedef was extremely infuriated as a pair of snow-white wings appeared on his back. However, he didn't dare charge at Zhou as he sped up to land on the ground. Even with wings, Hardedef didn't dare fight Zhou in midair. The flying ability of his wings was on a completely different level from Zhou aerial combat ability. How could Zhou let him off? His saber was like a rainbow as he slashed at Hardedef again and again. Although he failed to kill Hardedef, he managed to sever one of his wings. Hardedef immediately lost control of his body and fell to the mountain below, nearly breaking his bones. Li Xian was dumbfounded as he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Indeed, it's impossible to escape. Hardedef, you really are a man of your word. Zhou had no intention of letting them off. He charged straight for the mountain and landed on the mountain peak. Those people had suffered greatly just now. They felt that they had suffered because they couldn't move freely in the sky. Now that Zhou dared to come down, how could they let go of this opportunity? They immediately surrounded him. A burly man held a huge shield in one hand and a huge hammer in the other as he charged at Zhou. Zhou didn't draw his saber. With a backhand, he struck out with the Grand Yin wind. The might of the banana fan erupted, sending the man flying with his hammer and shield. With a bang, the man slammed into the mountain wall like a cannonball, creating a crater. His hammer and shield flew out of his hands, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His hair and eyebrows were covered in a layer of frost. After struggling a few times, the man failed to stand up. Indeed, Hardedef has something that can restrain the Grand Yin wind. That's why he isn't affected by it. After figuring this out, Zhou switched his primordial energy art to a Tao Sutra. His life providence also became a Tao body that could infinitely recover primordial energy. Seeing a few more people rush over, Zhou fanned again, sending them flying. All of them fell to the ground with broken bones as they rolled on the ground screaming. More than 10 people were finished in just a few fan strikes. Seeing that the situation wasn't looking good, Hardedef turned around and tried to escape. Didn't you want to fight me? Zhou obviously wasn't willing to let him off. The bamboo blade slashed at Hardedef's back with a cold beam. Hardedef raised his sword to block, but the sword formed from a legendary companion egg was sliced apart by the bamboo blade. The blade didn't stop as it slashed at Hardedef's armor, leaving a foot-long mark on it. Blood immediately gushed out. Hardedef's expression changed drastically. As he retreated, he summoned his companion beasts to block Zhou. Unfortunately, his mind was in a mess. He had no intention of controlling the companion beasts to fight Zhou. All he wanted was for the companion beasts to block Zhou so that he could take the opportunity to escape. The bamboo blade in Zhou's hand flashed as the legendary companion beasts were slashed cleanly. Before Hardedef could run far, Zhou's palm struck him in the back, causing him to spew out blood as he fell to the ground. Although it took a long time to describe, it only took a moment for more than 10 people to fall to the ground. None of them could get up. "Kill me if you have the guts," Hardedef shouted angrily when he saw Zhou step on his chest. "Wouldn't killing you be letting you off too easily?" Zhou stabbed out with the bamboo blade in his hand, piercing through Hardedef's primordial energy sea. "Zhou, I'll fight you to the death." Hardedef howled crazily in pain, wishing he could devour Zhou's flesh and blood. "You aren't qualified," Zhou said coldly. He brandished the bamboo blade again and sliced open Hardedef's armor. He saw a strange necklace around Hardedef's neck. The necklace was embedded with crystals, and in the crystals, there seemed to be wind flowing. It formed a vortex inside the crystals, making it look very strange. From the looks of it, this should be the thing that made the grand wind lose its effect. Zhou flicked his bamboo blade and snapped the necklace's clasp, causing it to land in his hand. Chapter 204. Is that the goddess of wind's guardian? Li Xian's eyes lit up when he saw the necklace. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Do you know what this is?" Zhou asked as he held the necklace. "I've only heard that there are extraordinary treasures in some dimensional zones. Those treasures have magical powers. The goddess of wind's guardian is one of them. Legend has it that it's a magical necklace with the power of the wind. Wearing the goddess of wind's guardian allows one to be immune to any wind elemental damage. However, according to what I know, the goddess of wind's guardian should belong to the Kamal family. Furthermore, it's unique. I wonder if this is true or not," Li Xian said. "It doesn't matter if it's true or not." Zhou stuffed the necklace into his pocket. This item could restrain the grand wind, so Zhou naturally wouldn't let anyone else have it. John, who was being stepped on, vomited blood in anger when he saw this scene. The necklace was indeed the goddess of wind's guardian. In order to restrain Zhou banana fan, Senator Cape had paid a huge price to borrow it from the Kamal family. Now, it had been snatched away by Zhou. Zhou ignored Hardadef and walked towards the others with bamboo blade in hand. He ignored their pleas or insults and pierced through their primordial energy seas with each strike. Many people fainted, but it was unknown if it was due to pain or anger. "Li Xian, help me search." Before they came, they should have bought quite a number of companion eggs at the market. See if they have any on them. As Zhou spoke, he personally took action. He stripped the clothes of a young man beside him and found 2 companion eggs. Li Xian didn't stand on ceremony as he searched the bodies of the others. Soon, the 2 of them found 14 companion eggs. They were likely at the legendary stage. As for what species they were, they really couldn't recognize them. John and company gritted their teeth in hatred. Back then, Tianzhua had only crippled them and didn't do anything else. However, Zhou and Li Xian were even more ruthless. Not only had they crippled them, but they had also plundered their belongings. "Let's go." After searching, Zhou turned around and left, ignoring John and company. "Old Zhou, what alacrity movement technique is that? It's so cool. You can actually float in the air like Superman," Li Xian asked Zhou enviously. Clearly, he was somewhat tempted. "That's not a movement technique. Unless you give up on the invincible connate divine art, don't even think about it," Zhou said half-truthfully. Even if Li Xian was willing to give up on the invincible connate divine art, he might not be able to master the Godfiend era. Zhou Godfiend era was simulated by the Lost Immortal Sutra, not something he had cultivated himself. Li Xian felt discouraged when he heard that. He said gloomily, "Forget it. Although it's cool to be able to fly in the air, mine isn't bad either." The 2 of them headed east. They only knew from the maps drawn by their predecessors that the Khanate Holy Temple was in the east, but they weren't too sure of its exact location. Because every time someone entered the Holy Land, the map they drew would be slightly different, but the general location of the Holy Temple would not be wrong. There were no dimensional creatures in the Holy Land, so the 2 of them didn't encounter any danger. After walking for more than half a day, they saw a sea appear in front of them. On the cliff by the sea stood an ancient purple building. It should be there. Li Xian was delighted as he called for Zhou to quickly walk over. When they arrived in front of the ancient building, there were already a few young people standing in front of it. Clearly, they were here to accept the Khanate Holy Temple's test. When the few of them saw Zhou, they were slightly taken aback. They were somewhat puzzled as though they were wondering why Zhou had come here. From their expressions, Zhou knew that these people definitely knew that John had led people to besiege them. "Zhou, you sure are lucky to not have been stopped by John and company," a black-robed youth said coldly as he looked at Zhou. "My luck has always been good," Zhou said. "However, your luck ends here. My target is in Jing. Since she didn't come, I originally thought it was beneath me to fight you. However, since John and those idiots failed to stop you and you ran in front of me, I can't let you return in one piece. I have to leave some marks so that you can show it to Entienzo when you return, the black-robed youth said arrogantly. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? If you want to attack, hurry up. Don't delay us from accepting the Khanate Holy Temple's test, Zhou said casually. The black-robed youth didn't say a word as terrifying black flames erupted from his body. He threw a punch at Zhou like a volcanic eruption. Zhou didn't use the banana fan. All he did was switch his primordial energy art to the ancient Sovereign Sutra and meet the black-robed youth's fist with an ashen palm. When the fist and palm collided, the black-robed youth felt his organs burn as though they were on fire. He opened his mouth and spat out a large pool of blood as his body collapsed limply to the ground. The smiles on the faces of the youths beside him instantly froze as a chill ran down their spines. They knew the black-robed youth's strength very well. He was rather famous among the families of the 6 heroes and wasn't inferior to John. However, he couldn't even withstand a single strike from Zhou. Don't tell me this is another Entienzo? They had an ominous feeling. Amidst the mountains, a beautiful butterfly leisurely flew past. There was a person sitting on the butterfly's back. As the butterfly flew, the person revealed a look of surprise. He made the butterfly change directions and land on a mountain peak. On the mountain peak, more than 10 people had fallen to the ground and were groaning in pain. They were none other than John and company. Lance, you're finally here. John was overjoyed when he saw the person on the butterfly's back. What's going on with you guys? Lance looked at John and the others and asked in surprise. Our primordial energy sea was destroyed by Zhou, and he even snatched our things. John gritted his teeth as he recounted the matter. Finally, he pleaded, that Zhou has a powerful companion beast helping him. We aren't his match. Now, only you can protect the dignity of our 6 hero families. The others are probably not his match. This Zhou is rather interesting, but I've already said that I'm not interested in him. Furthermore, you were the one who came looking for him. Instead, you were crippled by him. You can only blame yourselves for not being skilled enough, Lance said as he patted the butterfly beneath him. The butterfly immediately rose into the sky and left the mountain peak. John and company were stunned. They never expected Lance to ignore the friendship between the 6 hero families. Chapter 205. Zhou sat on the stone steps outside the Khanate Holy Temple and gamed while Li Xian entered the Khanate Holy Temple to take the test. The black-robed youth and the others had long disappeared. Even the black-robed youth's primordial energy sea had been destroyed and his items had been stolen. They didn't dare stay here any longer. Zhou couldn't help but feel disappointed that he had died at the hands of the golden flying ant again. He had lost count of the number of times he had been killed by the golden flying ant, but he had failed to touch the white cocoon. Zhou really wanted to know what was inside the white cocoon. Why are you the only one here? Didn't anyone else come to the Khanate Holy Temple? Just as Zhou was about to restart the game, he saw a man land on a butterfly. The man glanced at the sealed temple door before looking at Zhou. There's another person inside the temple, Zhou answered when he saw that the other party didn't seem to have any ill intentions. Lance got off the butterfly's back and put it away. He looked at Zhou's phone and said, I also like to play mobile games, but I play fighting games. This kind of repetitive grinding isn't suitable for me. With that said, Lance took out his phone and opened a game. Unfortunately, the magnetic field here is too unstable. The interference to the signal is too strong. Otherwise, we could play online. I don't play fighting games, Zhou said. That's a pity. Lance seemed somewhat disappointed as he sat down on the steps beside him. As he gamed, he asked, Are you also interested in the Khanate Holy Temple? No, I'm only here to take a look with my friend. Are you also here to take the test? Zhou asked. That's not it. I'm only here to take a look at what the Khanate Holy Temple looks like. I don't plan on accepting its special physique, Lance said. Zhouwen found this person rather interesting. As he spoke, he gamed. His operations and thoughts weren't messed up at all. Furthermore, his operations were extremely meticulous. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Since you're already here, why don't you give it a try? Perhaps you might have a chance of obtaining the Khanate Infinite Body, Zhouwen asked Lance with interest. As Lance gamed, he said, It's not just the Khanate Infinite Body. I'm not interested in all the special physiques in the Holy Land. However, my family insisted that I come here, so I came to take a look. Since I'm here, I might as well visit all the temples and treat it as a vacation. You are an interesting person. Zhouwen found him more and more interesting. You're also very interesting. I've only heard of people coming to the Holy Land to fight for qualifications. I've never heard of people accompanying their friends, Lance said with a smile. I want to snatch it too, but I don't plan on snatching the Khanate Infinite Body, Zhouwen said. The 6 physiques of the Sacred Land have their own advantages and disadvantages. This innate infinite body has extremely high requirements for physical fitness. Ordinary people simply cannot meet the requirement. According to the invincible divine body, your body is invincible temple when body holy, saint spirit body saint, which spirit Wu temple, see, saint master of world, Qin, Zhou, One, sun temple, God. From your aura, it seems a little strange. It probably doesn't match any of the holy temple's special physique. If you wish to snatch a special physique, the difficulty will probably be higher than others. Lance put down his phone and sized up Zhouwen for a moment. Where there is a will, there is a way. Zhouwen wasn't willing to talk about himself, but he was very interested in Lance. He asked, Why don't you want a special physique? It's something everyone wants. Everyone wants it. After so many years, there aren't many people with 6 special constitutions in the Alliance, but there are still quite a few of them. There's no point in me taking what everyone else has, so I might as well not take it. Furthermore, the clans in Tianzhua doesn't have a special constitution, so he can't suppress anyone in his generation. If Tianzhua can do it, so can I. Lance rarely told others about this, but for some reason, he casually mentioned it to Zhouwen. Upon hearing Tianzua's name, Zhouwen's expression turned odd. You know Tianzua? Lance was very sharp. He guessed that Zhouwen knew Tianzua from his expression. I do, but our relationship isn't that good. If you want to ask me about him, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, Zhouwen said with a shrug. There's no need. There's no need. Don't tell me anything about Tianzua. Lance hurriedly waved his hand. Why is that? Zhouwen looked at Lance in puzzlement. I want to defeat him with my own hands in the future. If I hear about him now and find out some of his weaknesses, it will be too boring. The Tianzua I want to defeat is the strongest Tianzua, Lance said solemnly. Zhouwen thought to himself, from the looks of it, this person should be from the 6 hero families. Otherwise, he wouldn't be thinking about defeating Tianzua all day. However, it's strange. Doesn't he know that I'm here on behalf of the family? After chatting for a while, they hit it off quite well. They then chatted about their experiences in cultivation and martial technique. Although their understandings were different, their philosophies were very compatible. As the two of them chatted, they suddenly saw the door to the Khanate Holy Temple open. Li Xian walked out. How was it? Zhouwen stood up and asked. I passed, but I don't know if anyone's results will be better than mine. We'll only know in 10 days, Li Xian said with a smile. I'm already done. Which temple do you want to go to? I'll accompany you. At that moment, Li Xian saw Lance. He clearly didn't know him. Seeing that Lance and Zhouwen seemed to be getting along well, he asked curiously, Who is this? Do you know someone? I just got to know him. Only then did Zhouwen recall that he didn't know Lance's name. Neither of them had told him their names. Lance stood up and said, It's time for me to enter. Let's meet again if there's a chance. However, before Lance could enter the Khanate Holy Temple, the WYRM statue coiled around the stone pillar in front of the door suddenly opened its eyes. Its body also moved as it came to life. It extended its head and stared at Zhou. Are you willing to be the spokesperson of my Khanate Holy Temple in the human world? The three of them were slightly taken aback. Lance looked at Zhou with an odd expression. As a disciple of the 6 hero families, he had never heard of anyone receiving an invitation from the temple. Even the first 6 heroes to come to the Holy Land had to go through a series of tests before they were selected. This was the first time he had seen someone take the initiative to invite Zhou. Zhou, what are you waiting for? Quickly agree. Li Xian hurriedly nudged Zhou when he saw him in a daze. However, Zhou wasn't happy about receiving an invitation. The reason he was in a daze was that, after the WYRM issued the invitation, his sigh of the Life Providence King seemed to stir restlessly. A sense of disgust spread, affecting Zhou. Chapter 206. The emotions were just too intense, so intense that Zhou didn't hesitate to reject her. Sorry, I'm only here to accompany my friend. I don't plan on obtaining anything from the Khanate Holy Temple. The WRM stared at Zhou again before slowly retreating to the stone pillar, slowly turning into a lifeless statue. Lance looked at Zhou with interest as though he had piqued his interest. Li Xian sighed and said, Old Zhou, if you rejected it because of me, it will make me feel touched and sad. No, the Khanate Infinite Body isn't my goal to begin with. Even without you, I would still reject it. Zhou was telling the truth. Your words make me even sadder, Li Xian joked. Let's go. Let's take a look at the other holy temples. Zhou only wanted to visit the other holy temples. The Sigh of the King Life Providence was a combination of his stats and the Lost Immortal Sutra, but now, the Sigh of the King actually rejected the holy temple. This meant that the advancement plan Zhou had previously thought of would probably be very difficult to succeed. If I can't use a special physique to raise my stats to 21 points, how can I advance to the epic stage? Zhou was filled with puzzlement. This fellow is rather interesting. Seeing Zhou and Li Xian leave, Lance turned around and entered the Khanate Holy Temple. Zhou and Li Xian rushed to the Sun Holy Temple not because of the Sun Strafe Art, but because the Sun Holy Temple was closest to the Khanate Holy Temple. However, they didn't know that the members of the 6 hero families had already gathered together and were discussing how to deal with Zhou. Previously, when Liz went to the various families to look for them, most of the members of the 6 hero families thought nothing of it. They felt that since Njing wasn't there was no need for them to go through the trouble of dealing with Zhou. However, who knew that Hardadef would end up having his primordial energy C crippled by Zhou when he led more than 10 people to teach Zhou a lesson? Even the black-robed youth from the Xia family had his primordial energy C crippled. Zhou looked like an Tianzhua again. This made many members of the 6 hero families unable to tolerate it. An Tianzhua's matter has already disgraced our 6 families. Now there's Zhou. This can't be allowed to continue. What do you think? Xiaobing said coldly. The black-robed youth, who had his primordial energy C crippled by Zhou in front of the Khanate Holy Temple, was Xiaobing's younger brother. Originally, I was too lazy to pay attention to him, but I didn't expect him to be so impudent. We really should teach him a lesson. Otherwise, others will think that we are easy to bully. In the future, everyone will dare to bully us, Dugu Chuan of the Dugu family said. Choking with sobs, strange novel www. Zhou has to be crippled. However, he has an abnormally powerful companion beast. That companion beast can transform into a fan. The wind it produces can't even withstand my light of judgment. If I can't finish off that fan, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult to subdue him, John said weakly. Hardadef said with a bitter smile, I did bring the goddess of wind's protection with me, but it was snatched away by Zhou. However, even with the goddess of wind's protection, it's useless. After all, that thing can only protect one person. The others will still be injured by the fan's power. Xia Bing and company were taken aback when they heard that. They never expected Hardadef to go to such length. He had even brought the goddess of wind's protection. Unfortunately, it had been snatched away by Zhou. Duguchuan pondered for a moment and said, "Such an primordial energy skill will definitely consume a lot of primordial energy. All we need to do is fight him one after another and deplete his primordial energy. That way, it'll be useless even if he has the fan." Hardadef hurriedly shook his head and said, "This method isn't feasible. When we fought him previously, he used the fan 6 times in one battle. However, he still had plenty of primordial energy and still had the strength to use other primordial energy skills. I reckon he has some treasure that can quickly recover his primordial energy." "In that case, it's really troublesome," Duguchuan said with a frown. "It's not much trouble. Leave that fan to me," Xiaobing said. "Xiaobing, are you confident? We can't fail again this time. Otherwise, the 6 hero families will really become laughingstocks," Duguchuan said. "It's not convenient for me to elaborate, but don't worry. As long as I'm certain that the fan is a manifestation of a wind elemental companion beast, I'm 100% confident that I can render it useless." Xiaobing was confident. "All right, I'll leave the problem of the fan to you. Let's go find Zhou now," Duguchuan said as he stood up. "Wait a moment." Hardadef stopped him. "What else is there?" Duguchuan frowned. Hardadef coughed lightly and said, "Apart from having that fan, Zhou is also very good at flying. Without using a flying companion beast or mount, he can move freely in the sky. He's almost like Superman. I wonder what primordial energy skill he cultivates or what flying treasure he has. When you go, be careful at all times. Don't let him use his flying abilities to escape." "Is it a wind elemental flying skill?" Xiaobing asked. "I don't think so. I don't sense the power of the wind from him." Hardadef shook his head. "That's a little troublesome. If it wasn't a wind elemental flying skill, I wouldn't have been able to do anything to him," Xiaobing said with a frown. "Leave this problem to me. I guarantee that he won't escape," a blond youth said. When Xiaobing and Duguchuan saw that the person who spoke was prose, they nodded slightly. They trusted his ability and didn't say anything else as they prepared to set off. "Wait a moment." Hardadef stopped them again. "What else is there?" Xiaobing was already somewhat impatient. "Zhou still has a saber. It's extremely sharp. The sword formed by my legendary snake of radiance was easily sliced apart by his saber. Also, the flying mounts we used previously were sliced into 2. You have to be careful," Hardadef added. "What else do you know? Tell me everything at once." Duguchuan was already having a headache. A terrifying pet, a powerful flying skill, and an extremely sharp weapon. Just one of these items was enough to make an ordinary person famous. Yet, Zhou had all 3. It was no wonder even Hardadef had fallen at his hands. It wasn't all Hardadef's incompetence. There's nothing else. By the way, Zhou also has a companion beast. Its defense is extremely strong. Typical legendary weapons will find it difficult to injure it. There's also a night pet that has powerful impact and destructive power," Hardadef added after some thought. Duguchuan, Xiaobing, and company looked at Hardadef as a thought arose in their minds. "Who's the rich? Aren't our 6 hero families the biggest rich families in the alliance? Why does it look like Zhou is richer than us?" Chapter 207. When Zhou and Li Xian arrived at the Sun God Temple, they were surprised to discover that there wasn't a single person in front of it. Furthermore, the door was open, proving that no one was taking the test inside. Strange, is the Sun God Temple that unpopular? No one is taking the test here? Li Xian looked around in puzzlement. Indeed, there was no one. We've been delayed for so long. Perhaps the person who came here to take the test has already left. Zhou walked into the sun god temple. He wanted to try and see if the Sai of the king would really repel special physique. After Zhou entered the temple, the door automatically closed. Li Xian sat on the stone steps outside, waiting for Zhou. However, just as he sat down, he saw a group of people walk over. When Li Xian took a look, his expression changed drastically. His frivolous look instantly vanished as his expression turned solemn. The people who came were all members of the 6 hero families. It was clearly not a coincidence that they had come together. Are you Li Xian from Luoyang's Li family? Xia Bing sized up Li Xian as about 40 to 50 people surrounded the temple. I'm Li Xian. Hello, Miss Xia. Li Xian bowed slightly at Xia Bing. Li Xian recognized Xia Bing. Among the 6 hero families of the Federation, the Xia family's roots were in the East District. They were the biggest wealthy family in the East District. The Li family was also considered a wealthy family in Luoyang, but compared to the Xia family, they were like landlords in the countryside. Furthermore, the Li family and the Xia family had business dealings. They had many uses for the Xia family. Even the Li family's invincible connate divine art was obtained from the Xia family. Since you call me Miss Xia, I'll give you a way out on account of your father and brother. Don't interact with people like Zhou again. It won't do you any good, Xia Bing said as she walked towards the Sun God Temple's entrance. Miss Xia, Zhou is taking the test inside. You can't enter now, Li Xian said with a smile, but he didn't make way. I'm waiting for him to take the test. Does he really think he can obtain the Sun God body? Back then, Tianzhua failed to obtain it. He won't be able to obtain it either. Furthermore, he will have to pay the price, Prose said disdainfully. What do you mean by that? The smile on Li Xian's face widened, but he realized that something was amiss. Although Li Xian didn't know what they had done, it definitely wasn't that simple. Logically speaking, outsiders couldn't enter the temple during the test, nor could they disturb the people inside. However, from Pro's tone, they clearly had a way to affect Zhou, who was undergoing the test. It was even possible for Zhou to suffer some sort of damage. Zhou God Dao Zhou. Xia Bing was already impatient. Zhou had crippled her brother's primordial energy C, making her extremely angry. She wished she could personally cripple Zhou Wen's primordial energy C. Xia Ming God. Bing Xia Xian said when Xia Bing frowned slightly as she stared at Li Xian and said, Li Xian, are you courting death? He looked at Xia Bing and said, Miss Xia, I really don't want to be your enemy, but the person being tested inside is my friend. I haven't had many children since I was young, and 2 of them died not long ago. This makes me very sad, so I especially don't wish to see my friend get hurt. Can you tell me what you want to do to Zhou? To have the courage to say such words, Luoyang's Li family has produced quite a figure. However, you should know your limit. Otherwise, you might not be able to bear the consequences, said Xia Bing. Why are you wasting your breath on him? Let's finish him off first before destroying Zhou Wen's trial. However, Prose didn't have Xia Bing's patience. As he spoke, he threw a punch at Li Xian. His fist flashed with lightning and carried a terrifying glow. Li Xian raised his fist to meet it. When the fists collided, Li Xian's body immediately trembled as though he had been electrocuted. Then, he was sent flying by Prose's punch. Li Xian's body slammed into the Sun God Temple's door and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he stood up shakily and gritted his teeth as he walked back to Prose. Courting death. Prose threw another punch. The lightning-like punch sent Li Xian flying again. It looked like Li Xian was in an even more miserable state than before. However, Li Xian still forced himself to walk back. It looked like he couldn't even walk steadily, as though a gust of wind could blow him down at any moment. Prose frowned and said, Li Xian, do you really want to die here? Is it worth it for Zhou? I don't want to see my friend get hurt again. Can you let him go? Li Xian whispered. Pros, don't waste time. Just cripple him, Duguchuan said. Pros nodded and threw another punch at Li Xian. However, this time, he struck Li Xian's abdomen. Typically, when people cultivated primordial energy arts, they needed to store their primordial energy in one place. This place was the primordial energy sea, but different primordial energy arts had different locations. Most of the primordial energy sea was in the lower dantian, which was where the abdomen was. If the primordial energy sea was crippled, primordial energy would leak out, preventing one from storing primordial energy. It was equivalent to being crippled. Some primordial energy arts didn't have their primordial energy sea in the lower dantian. That made it harder to find. Pros didn't know where Li Xian's primordial energy sea was, so he first attacked Li Xian's abdomen. If his primordial energy sea was there, then the terrifying lightning could penetrate it and cause his primordial energy to leak out, turning him into a cripple. Bam! Li Xian was sent flying again, looking even more miserable. He struggled to get up, but he stumbled and couldn't even stand steadily. However, he still wanted to get up and walk back. Everyone was somewhat moved. There weren't many people in this era who could be so foolish for a friend. However, Xia Bing suddenly said with a strange expression, "Something's wrong. His body has a jade-like luster, and his eyes have a faint glow. That's a sign that he has cultivated in the invincible connate divine art. Such injuries are nothing to a legendary who has cultivated in the invincible connate divine art. Furthermore, his primordial energy sea isn't in the lower dantian, so it's impossible for him to be in such a miserable state." Xia Bing's words left everyone taken aback. When Li Xian heard Xia Bing's words, his swaying body, which looked like it was about to collapse, stood up straight. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and his entire aura changed. "From the looks of it, I still can't hide it from you, Miss Xia." Li Xian sighed slightly. He originally wanted to stall for more time, but unfortunately, with Xia Bing, who was familiar with the invincible connate divine art, it was useless no matter how good his acting was. Pros was immediately enraged when he saw that he had been fooled. Lightning surged from his body, and the lightning on his fist was like the sun as it blasted at Li Xian once again. Instead of retreating, Li Xian advanced. A heavy sword with lightning swirling around it appeared in his hand. The lightning on the sword flashed as it met Pro's fist. Boom! The two types of lightning exploded in the air. Li Xian stood proudly on the stone steps with the heavy sword in hand, while Pros took several steps back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 208. Everyone was astonished. Pros was rather famous even among the families of the 6 heroes. It was quite surprising that he had been repelled by Li Xian. "Isn't that Thunder God General?" The Thunder God General he bought at the trading market actually has Thunder God augmentation. What good luck! Someone immediately recognized the Thunder God sword in Li Xian's hand. He's indeed lucky. 2 million for a Thunder God General with Thunder God augmentation. "This punk sure is lucky," someone said enviously. Back at the trading market, Li Xian had been mocked when he spent 2 million to buy the Thunder God General companion egg. It was a companion egg that could be bought for 400,000 to 500,000 elsewhere, but he insisted on spending 2 million here. It was foolish. However, when they saw that Thunder God General had Thunder God augmentation, many people's eyes turned red with envy. The Thunder God sword was indeed worthy of its title as the best offensive pet at the legendary stage. Even a fellow like Pros, who was adept at lightning powers, had suffered quite a bit. Pros, who's known as the Son of Lightning, is nothing much. He can't even withstand the lightning powers of a companion beast. How disappointing! Li Xian wanted to infuriate Pros and make him fight him alone. This way, he could stall for more time. "Pros, he's deliberately infuriating you to stall for time," Xia Bing said. Pros nodded slightly. His golden pupils seemed to flash with lightning as he stared at Li Xian and said, "You have successfully infuriated me, so die." Pros attacked, but he wasn't the only one. The few descendants of the 6 hero families at the front all attacked Li Xian, hoping to finish him off as quickly as possible before destroying Zhou Wen's trial. 16 years of oblivion. Today, I'll fight everyone with a single sword. I don't wish to leave my name in history, but I wish to live up to my name. Li Xian held the Thunder God's sword as he stood proudly in front of the Sun God temple. His expression had never been so serious. The sword struck out like lightning, stirring up ripples as it met the attacks of pros and company. Zhou Wen walked into the Sun God temple. He originally imagined that it was just a palace, but after entering, he realized that the interior of the Sun God temple was a void. In this void, a sun hung high in the sky, emitting incomparably dazzling divine light, as if it was the center of the void of the universe. Zhou Wen was stepping on a stone staircase that floated in the void, and it extended all the way to the sun in the void. Cultivator, step on the stone steps and walk towards the sun. The closer you are to the sun, the more likely you are to obtain the power of the god of the sun. An ethereal voice came from the void. Zhou Wen didn't sense any abnormal reaction from the Sai of the king as he walked towards the stone steps ahead. After taking a few steps, Zhou Wen felt the surrounding temperature rise significantly. The temperature rose too quickly. After walking more than 10 stone steps, Zhou Wen felt as though he had walked into a furnace. On the other hand, the chick standing on his shoulder had a look of enjoyment on its face, as if the heat made it very comfortable. Before Zhou Wen entered the temple, he had already switched his primordial energy art to the Ancient Sovereign Sutra. The Ancient Sovereign Sutra also seemed to have a portion of the power of fire, but it was completely different from the power of the Sun God Temple. Zhou Wen originally imagined that the power of the Ancient Sovereign Sutra would allow him to gain an advantage in the Sun God Temple, but now, he realized that that wasn't the case. He used all his strength to resist the Sun God's brilliance, but he was already drenched in sweat after taking about 20 steps. If he continued walking, he might be dried up by the sun after another 10 steps. With no choice, Zhou Wen had no choice but to activate the Lotus Flower Buddha Body primordial energy skill and rely on his protective primordial energy to resist the Sun God's brilliance. But even so, it only allowed Zhou Wen to take a few more steps. He was still an extremely long distance away from the sun in the void. From the looks of it, ordinary people really can't withstand the power of the Sun God Temple. Unless one cultivates the corresponding primordial energy art and obtains the temple's recognition, even an epic expert wouldn't be able to walk to the front of the sun. With this in mind, Zhou Wen had the intention to retreat. He was only here to seek a way to break through, not to risk his life. Since he already knew that it was impossible, there was no need for him to continue. Just as Zhou Wen was about to retreat, the Ancient Sovereign Sutra in his body automatically changed back to the Lost Immortal Sutra. As the Lost Immortal Sutra slowly flowed, the originally ethereal Lost Immortal Sutra gradually turned warm. As the Lost Immortal Sutra heated up his primordial energy, the Sun God's brilliance around Zhou Wen's body didn't seem as hot. It immediately energized Zhou Wen. The Lost Immortal Sutra has finally taken effect. Could it be that there's hope of advancing this time? Zhou Wen was delighted as he dismissed the thought of retreating and continued walking forward. After the Lost Immortal Sutra took effect, the effects of the Sun God's brilliance on him decreased. When it shone on Zhou Wen, he found it warm and no longer felt the burning sensation from before. If I were to cultivate the Sun Strafe art, this should be the effect when I come to the Sun God Temple again, right? Zhou Wen thought to himself as he walked towards the sun. The sun that seemed far away seemed to have become much closer. With every step Zhou Wen took, he could sense that he was rapidly approaching the sun. How is this a test? It's clearly a selection. Those who are chosen by the temple can easily approach the sun. Those who aren't chosen can't reach the sun no matter how hard they work. If it wasn't for the lost Immortal Sutra fooling the terrifying existence here, I wouldn't have been able to walk to the sun even if I advanced to the epic stage. Indeed, nothing in this world is truly fair. It's the same even in this miraculous sun god temple. As he pondered, Zhouwen approached the sun. The sun wasn't as blinding as before. Zhouwen could even see its appearance clearly. It wasn't a sun, but a golden seed. It was shaped like a pine nut and its entire body was like a golden crystal. It was the seed's body that was emitting light and heat, making it look like a sun. Zhouwen glanced at the chick on his shoulder and saw that it still looked relaxed. It didn't seem to be affected by the sun's temperature at all. He couldn't help but be secretly alarmed. He had the lost Immortal Sutra, which played the role of confusing the Sun God Temple's mechanism. He wasn't suppressed by the Sun God Temple's power, so he was able to reach this point. However, the chick didn't have the lost Immortal Sutra. It relied on its physique to survive. This was somewhat terrifying. I wonder what level of dimensional creature this chick's mother is. From the looks of it, it's probably not as simple as an epic. Zhouwen walked forward step by step, approaching the seed without being affected at all. Finally, Zhouwen finished walking the last stone step. The seed was just inches away from him. He just needed to extend his hand to grab the sun-like seed. Chapter 209. Outside the Sun God Temple, Li Xian leaned against the temple's door as he brandished the Thunder God's sword crazily, blocking wave after wave of attack. However, no matter how powerful he was alone, he couldn't withstand all the attacks. Sword flashes, battle aura, flames, frost, and all sorts of powers passed through the gaps in his moves, tearing apart the armor he wore. Even the golden silk soft armor that the three-eyed golden warrior had transformed into was in tatters from withstanding too many attacks. The terrifying sword beams sliced through Li Xian's body of flesh and blood. The powerful battle aura caused his bones to emit cracking sounds as all sorts of attacks left countless wounds on his body. From the beginning to now, Li Xian had more than 100 injuries on his body, but he still stood in front of the temple and continued brandishing the Thunder God's sword in his hand like a tireless war machine. As for the injuries on his body, they healed at an unbelievable speed. Often, the wounds that had just formed a second ago would be healed a few seconds later. The injuries were like water that flowed through his body, vanishing with a flick of his hand. The speed at which he recovered from his injuries left Xia Bing and company alarmed. Although the invincible Connate Divine Art has powerful recovery abilities, it's only at the legendary stage. It's impossible for it to have such powerful effects unless there's something wrong with his life providence. Xia Bing had already guessed the reason and couldn't help but feel envious. The invincible Connate Divine Art was originally the first primordial energy art the Xia family obtained. It corresponded to the Connate Holy Temple, but as the invincible Connate Divine Art required a virgin to cultivate, one would become a cripple once it was broken. They could only cultivate from the beginning, so the Xia family had reluctantly given up on the invincible Connate Divine Art. Back then, one of the 6 heroes, the Xia family's elder, had gone from an invincible hero to an ordinary person in order to get married and have children. In order to prevent such a thing from happening again, the Xia family's elder had found a few other primordial energy arts to replace the invincible Connate Divine Art. However, even so, the Xia family had no intention of handing the invincible Connate Divine Art to others. The Li family had helped the Xia family greatly and offered to exchange the invincible Connate Divine Art. Although the Xia family had given it to them, it was only a simplified version. It was still somewhat inferior to the true invincible Connate Divine Art. Furthermore, without the corresponding Connate Infinite Constitution, the power that the invincible Connate Divine Art could unleash was very limited. However, Li Xian only cultivated a simplified version of the invincible Connate Divine Art and didn't have a Connate Infinite body. Yet, he was able to condense a life providence that was in no way inferior to the Xia family's hero. It was truly enviable. However, Li Xian's life providence was clearly different from the Xia family's elder's life providence. The Xia family only knew that he definitely had powerful recovery abilities, but they weren't too sure about the exact functions. This fellow is an unkillable monster. There's no point in continuing the battle. If we don't quickly enter the Sun God Temple, Zhouwen will probably come out soon. All the work we did previously will be wasted, Duguchuan said. I know, but what can we do? Pros punched Li Xian in the chest, causing his chest to cave in slightly, but in the blink of an eye, his chest bulged up again as though he had never been injured. I do have a companion beast that should be useful. Although it can't kill him, it can first restrain him. However, without this pet, I'm afraid you will have to put in more effort when dealing with Zhouwen later, Duguchuan said hesitantly. Look at the situation now. Let's get rid of this monster first. As long as we destroy Zhouwen's trial, he will be severely injured. Is there a need to be afraid that we won't be able to cripple him? Pros said. All right. Duguchuan thought that it made sense. Without any hesitation, he summoned a companion beast. It was a huge snow-white spider with a blood-colored pattern on its back. The pattern looked like a woman's face. In the next second, the huge spider transformed into a snow-white rod that landed in Duguchuan's hand. Duguchuan found an opportunity to use the snow-white rod to smash Li Xian's body. The weapon that looked like a rod instantly transformed into a huge net that bound Li Xian's body. Duguchuan tugged at the net strings, hoping to pull Li Xian away from the door. Li Xian used the Thunder God sword to slice at the net, but the Thunder God sword was stuck to the net. The more he struggled, the tighter the net became. However, Li Xian was quite strong. Duguchuan was unable to pull Li Xian over alone. Why aren't you helping? Duguchuan shouted. A few people beside him came over to help him pull the net, and Li Xian's figure was forcefully pulled out. Duguchuan pulled Li Xian away and said to Pros, let's hold him back first. Hurry up and take action. Don't let Zhouwen finish the trial. Alright, leave it to me. Don't worry. Without needing Duguchuan to say anything, Pros had already rushed to the door. Li Xian wanted to stop him, but he was powerless. Pros took out something from his chest pocket. It was a sun disk. He fumbled around the Sun God Temple's door for a while before placing the sun disk into a groove on the door. The sun disk fit perfectly with the door as though it was born as one. The sun disk was left behind by an elder of the Pros family, who was one of the 6 heroes back then. The physique he obtained was the sun god body of the Sun God Temple. The sun disk was also something he had brought out from the Sun God Temple. As the first spokesperson of the Sun God Temple, the Sun God Temple had given him the authority. If one of his descendants inherited the Sun God body bloodline, they could bring the sun disk back to the Sun God Temple and use it to activate the Sun God body enhancement trial. The enhancement trial was specially prepared for people with the Sun God body. The difficulty far exceeded ordinary trials. Ignoring ordinary people without the Sun God body, even people with the Sun God body bloodline might not be able to pass it. In the past, someone from the Pros family had attempted to accept the Sun God Temple enhancement trial with the Sun God body bloodline. In the end, not only did he fail the trial, he even returned with serious injuries. It took him 3 to 4 years to fully recover from his injuries. Speaking of which, it was quite a coincidence. Xia Bing and Pros knew that the family had the Sun Strafe art and that it was most compatible with the Sun God Temple. They were certain that Zhouwen had definitely cultivated in the Sun Strafe art and would come to the Sun God Temple to take the test. Therefore, they had set up this trap. Although Zhouwen didn't cultivate in the Sun Strafe art, he had coincidentally come to the Sun God Temple. It could only be said that Pros and company had hit the jackpot. Inside the Sun God Temple, Zhouwen was just about to reach out to pluck the sun-like seed when he suddenly saw the seed glow brightly, turning abnormally resplendent. Chapter 210. As the seed's temperature rose abnormally, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose as well. The entire sun god temple burned with terrifying golden flames that instantly filled the void. The seed was like golden glass, and there was a golden rune flashing within it. Zhou was immediately given a fright as his clothes burned. He immediately cursed inwardly. The lost Immortal Sutra was only a disguised physique after all. It wasn't the true sun god body, so he would definitely be burned to ashes by the flames. Just as the golden flames were about to burn him, he summoned the banana fan, and before he could use it, he felt a chill on his neck. The flames on his body had automatically extinguished. Zhou was slightly taken aback as he looked down and realized that the chill came from the pendant around his neck. It was the ivory pendant Wang Mingyuan had given him before they parted. Could it be that the pendant teacher gave me isn't an ordinary item? Zhou was secretly alarmed. Without any time to think, Zhou held the banana fan and rushed out of the sun god temple. As for the seed, he didn't dare take it even if he wanted to. The temperature on it was terrifyingly high. Even if metal touched the seed, it would probably melt. Suddenly, the chick on Zhou shoulder opened its mouth and sucked. The golden flames around Zhou immediately surged towards the chick's mouth like a breached dam. Zhou watched helplessly as the golden flames that filled the sky surged into the chick's tiny mouth like a surging river. Its tiny body was like a bottomless abyss. No matter how many golden flames were sucked in, they vanished without a trace. As the golden flames were devoured, the chick's pale yellow feathers gradually gained a luster. It looked like its feathers were becoming more plump and had a pale golden glow. The more golden flames it absorbed, the more plump and lustrous the chick's feathers became. Even its body seemed to grow a little bigger. Zhou watched helplessly as the golden flames in the void were sucked clean by the chick. The terrifying heat completely vanished, leaving only the seed emitting light like a tiny sun. In that moment, the chick's body had already grown to the size of a pigeon. Its feathers were pale gold, making it look like a pigeon with a special color. "It's all thanks to you." Zhou patted the chick's head and retracted the banana fan. Although the banana fan's grand wind could restrain the golden flames, Zhou's primordial energy was limited. With his Tao body's recovery ability, it was impossible for him to continuously use the grand wind. When the time came, he would still suffer. With the flames extinguished, Zhou looked at the golden seed and frowned slightly. The golden symbols in the seed were still twinkling. He could sense that the temperature of the seed was extremely shocking. He attempted to grab it with his hand, but before his fingers even touched the seed, he felt as though it was being cooked by the terrifying heat. Seeing that it was impossible for him to obtain the seed, Zhou's heart stirred. He took out his mysterious phone and snapped a picture of the seed. The camera successfully locked onto the seed. After Zhou snapped it, the seed immediately vanished and was stored in his phone. Zhou couldn't help but be overjoyed. He hurriedly put away his phone and turned to walk out. The sudden change in the sun god temple made Zhou suspect that something had happened outside. Outside the sun god temple, Pros and company were waiting for Zhou to come out. Although some people wished for Zhou to die inside, they knew that Zhou wouldn't die that easily. However, his injuries were likely not light. Against a heavily injured Zhou, they would likely have an easier time. If Hardadef hadn't made Zhou sound so rich, they wouldn't have come up with such a plan. If this were any other time, they would have directly sought out Zhou and used force to suppress him. Boom! The door to the Sun God Temple finally opened. Fusro and company hurriedly prepared their companion beasts and primordial energy skills, prepared to take Zhou down when he rushed out. However, when they saw the situation inside the Sun God Temple's door, they couldn't help but be taken aback. At the same time the Sun God Temple opened, the engravings and patterns on the temple began to emit a holy glow. The ancient stone palace was now filled with resplendent divine light, as though it was a mythical palace. The sun engraving at the highest point of the palace emitted an unparalleled glow, as though it was announcing something to the world. Why would a phenomenon appear in the sun god temple at this moment? Isn't this a phenomenon that will only appear in 10 days when the trial ends? There's still a long time before the 10 days. Why is it now? The more Prose spoke, the softer his voice became as his expression turned uglier. He had already figured out that there was only one possibility for such a situation to happen. Someone had already walked up to the sun seed and taken it away. However, the outcome of this conjecture was something even Prose found unbelievable. Even if it was a normal sun god temple trial, almost no one could walk up to the sun seed and directly pluck it, let alone the trial that used the sun disk to strengthen the trial. Even in their family, over the years, only 2 people had managed to do it. One of them was a first-generation hero, and the other had inherited the bloodline of the sun god body. He had then taken the ordinary trial and obtained the sun seed directly. As for the enhanced trial, even with the sun god body, no one had been able to obtain the sun seed. It was naturally impossible for Zhou to have the sun god body. Prose refused to believe that he had obtained the sun seed during the enhanced trial. However, no matter how much he refused to believe it, the truth was already in front of him. Zhou had walked out of the sun god temple unscathed. Even the pigeon on his shoulder was unharmed. Prose, what's going on? Didn't you say that no one can pass the enhanced trial? That without the sun god body, surviving is a problem? Duguchuan couldn't help but question Prose when he saw that Zhou was unscathed and that such a phenomenon had appeared in the sun god temple. How would I know? Prose was also infuriated. He also wanted to know what was going on. It was completely different from what he had imagined. Now isn't the time to talk about this. Let's take down Zhou first. According to the plan, even if he wasn't injured in the temple, we can still cripple him, Xia Bing said as she drew her sword and attacked Zhou. You guys are really haunting me. Zhou turned to look and saw that Li Xian was bound by a white net like a fish. However, it didn't look like there was any major problem. He immediately felt relieved. Seeing Xia Bing and company attack him, Zhou fanned at them with the banana fan, sending the grand Yin wind sweeping over. However, to Zhou surprise, Xia Bing held a calabash in her hand and sucked at the grand Yin wind. The wind was sucked into the calabash, leaving nothing behind. Chapter 211. Zhou was alarmed, but Duguchuan, Prose, and company were overjoyed. They increased the strength in their hands as beams of various colors shot towards Zhou. Prose was prepared. The myriad lightning sky prison was ready to be activated at any moment to prevent Zhou from escaping through the air. Duguchuan also summoned a strange shield, prepared to block Zhou's sharp bamboo blade. Xia Bing even summoned 3 companion beasts, prepared to restrain Zhou's 3-eyed golden warrior and mutated fiend steed. The others also used their own abilities, hoping to take down Zhou on the spot without giving him any chance to resist. However, before Zhou could draw his saber, the chick on his shoulder suddenly spat out a mouthful of golden flames at the sky. Golden flames spewed out like a flood, instantly turning the square outside the sun god temple into a sea of flames. Immediately, tragic cries sounded as everyone was dumbfounded. They had carefully prepared for so long and had tried all means to restrain Zhou, but before they could use many of their methods, they had been burned to nothingness by the chick on Zhou's shoulder. Instantly, screams filled the air. Many people were rolling on the ground as they cried out, hoping to extinguish the flames on their bodies. Some even took off their clothes as they ran. Without any hesitation, Zhou drew his saber and charged in. Without any regard for the consequences, he mercilessly stabbed at their dantians. Most people's primordial energy seas were at their dantians, so they were basically crippled after being stabbed by Zhou. A small number of people whose primordial energy seas weren't in their dantians definitely didn't feel good after being stabbed in the abdomen by Zhou. They kept screaming on the ground. Zhouwen searched for Xia Bing in the chaos, but she was nowhere to be seen. Even Duguchuan was nowhere to be seen. Prose was just about to take advantage of the chaos to escape when Zhouwen slashed at him. Prose was alarmed and infuriated. He summoned his companion beasts to fend off Zhouwen, but he still wanted to run. He didn't dare continue fighting. The chick's mouthful of flames had scared him out of his wit. There were many legendary companion beasts that could spit out flames, but he had never seen one that could turn the entire square into a sea of fire. What was even more terrifying was that the golden flames were clearly not ordinary flames. They could even burn through his protective battle aura. It was truly frightening. Prose fled very quickly, but he wasn't as fast as Zhouwen. Zhouwen cleaved his companion beast into two with a single strike as his saber kept slashing at Prose. Prose was in a bad situation. He turned around and summoned a gigantic axe to meet Zhouwen's bamboo blade, but the axe was sliced through by the bamboo blade. Alarmed, Prose didn't dare continue fighting as he desperately retreated. The Prose was with a Wen's bamboo blade, Zhouwen's Zhou and Zhouwen also. The one, Prose, Zhou, Chuan, and 1. By Zhou, Fan, Zhou, and An. By 1, and the 1, he. 1, the 6, 1, and 1 by 1, and. 1, and, family and 1, and of by ch, 1 and all 1, and 1, family Prose from 1 and 1. Thankfully, apart from the children of the 6 families, there were only a few descendants of bigwigs. Not many people could see this scene. There was only one spot for every bigwig, unlike the descendants of the 6 hero families. As long as they were old and strong enough, they could enter the Holy Land. After they entered, they headed straight for the Holy Land they fancied. No one wasted time strolling around. Xia Bing and company originally believed that, apart from Zhouwen, no descendants of any major figures would choose the Sun God Temple, so this matter wouldn't be seen by others. However, this scene had been seen by someone. Furthermore, he had recorded it with his cell phone. The incident of Entienzhua crippling the 6 hero families is happening again. That fellow is too strong, the person marveled as he filmed. However, he was rather careful. He only hid in the shadows and didn't reveal his tracks, afraid that he would be discovered by the 6 families. By the time the battle ended, the square was littered with people lying on the ground. Furthermore, they were all clutching their stomachs and screaming. The spiderweb on Li Xian's body was burned apart by the golden flames. After escaping, Li Xian didn't hesitate to join the battlefield. However, he wasn't beating people up, but plundering the bodies of those who had fallen to the ground. Zhouwen couldn't help but feel regretful that he didn't find Xia Bing. He really wanted to know what the calabash in Xia Bing's hand was. After plundering with Li Xian, the two of them swaggered off, leaving behind the children of the 6 families who were screaming on the ground. When they arrived at an uninhabited cave, Zhouwen and Li Xian sat down to split the spoils. Since they didn't know what species the companion eggs were, they split a pile each. Zhouwen obtained 26 companion eggs. Although he didn't know what species they were, companion eggs that could be bought by those fellows probably weren't cheap. Zhouwen planned on finding a time to use the mysterious phone to take a look at the stats of these companion eggs before selectively incubating or fusing them. The worst part was obviously a gift for Banana Fairy. As Zhouwen was making his plans, the chick flew down from his shoulder and pecked open a companion egg with its beak. It lowered its head and sucked all the essence inside into its stomach. The chick had just contributed greatly, so eating 2 companion eggs wasn't a big deal. It wasn't easy for Zhouwen to be generous and feed the chick another companion egg, but to his surprise, the chick didn't appreciate it. It didn't even look at it, as though it wasn't interested at all. "You're still picky about food. It's great that you don't eat it." Zhouwen put away the companion egg and ignored the chick. Compared to the companion egg, he was more interested in the sun seed. He wanted to know what it was. Previously, He had been in a hurry to come out and hadn't looked at the sun seed after putting it into the mysterious phone. Now that he took out his phone to take a look, he heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that the sun seed was still in the blood-colored avatar's hand and hadn't vanished. Using his phone to check the sun seed stats, Zhou was slightly taken aback. Sun God Power Crystal, formed from the sun god's blood essence. Refining and absorbing it can improve one's physique. The game screen popped up a choice on whether to absorb it. Zhou didn't sense any signs of rejection from the Sai of the King, so he chose to absorb it. The Sun God Power Crystal immediately transformed into wisps of golden light that fused into the blood-colored avatar's body. Zhou also felt a scorching force surge into his body, causing it to heat up. After everything returned to normal, Zhou saw that in the blood-colored avatar's stats, the strength stat had become 21. Furthermore, behind 21 was the word, Sun. What does this mean? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. Chapter 2:12. Zhou attempted to use his strength, but he didn't feel that his strength had any additional stats, nor did it have a scorching effect. He didn't know what the word sun meant. However, he had finally found a way to break through. Zhou planned on heading to the other temples. If he could successfully obtain God Power Crystals, he might be able to advance to the epic stage. When the time came, learning the mutated fairy skill would be a piece of cake. Among the 6 temples, Zhou had already been to the Khanate and Sun Holy temples. Among the remaining temples, the closest one was the Divine Emperor Holy Temple. However, after some consideration, Zhou didn't head to the Divine Emperor Holy Temple. Instead, he went to the Trajectory Holy Temple that was slightly further away. Zhou had seen John's Holy Emperor body before. It was likely a strength-type physique. The Sun Holy Temple had already strengthened his strength, so the two seemed to overlap. Therefore, Zhou planned on heading to the Trajectory Holy Temple to take a look. It was said that the physique given by the Trajectory Holy Temple was the body of Trajectory, the most mysterious physique among the 6 physiques. The Dugu family, who had the body of Trajectory, didn't seem to have any particularly outstanding performance. Therefore, this physique was the most controversial. Some people even said that the owner of the body of Trajectory, the first-generation hero of the Dugu family, wasn't worthy of being ranked with the other 5 heroes. However, the Dugu family had been passed down to this day. It was the most stable family among the 6 families. Although the other 5 families were more famous and powerful, there would occasionally be people who died for various reasons. However, not a single one of the Dugu family's bloodline had died yet. The first-generation heroes of the other 5 families were almost all dead, but the first-generation hero of the Dugu family was still alive and well. Now, the Dugu family was so powerful in the league that it was ranked in the top 3 among the 6 families. Many people said in private that it was better to live long than to have good kung fu. Look at the Dugu family's old hero. He had outlived countless young heroes from the other 5 families, but he was still alive and well. In the future, it was possible that all the people from the other 5 families would die, allowing the Dugu family to rule the world. The name of the Trajectory, coupled with the longevity of the Dugu family, made Zhou suspect that the body of Trajectory was some kind of speed-type physique. Therefore, the Dugu family was able to escape fast enough to avert danger time again and preserve their lives. Zhou was very interested in the ability to escape, so he planned on heading to the Trajectory Holy Temple to take a look. Many people from the 6 families had been maimed by Zhou, so the remaining people didn't dare cause trouble for him. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. Zhou and Li Xian walked in the Holy Land for more than a day, but they didn't encounter anyone from the 6 families. Instead, they encountered the descendants of a few bigwigs from other places. Those people's attitude towards Zhou was lukewarm. They didn't offend him, nor did they have any intention of getting close to him. Clearly, they didn't wish to interfere in the feud between Zhou and the 6 families. There was no one outside, but when Zhou arrived, the door was and closed, the door, and the god, the door. Zhou and Li Xian could only wait outside. Zhou took out his phone to continue playing his game, while Li Xian studied the companion eggs, with the intention of hatching them. After waiting for a while, he suddenly heard a rumble. The door to the Trajectory Holy Temple opened and a person rushed out. The person had really rushed out. He ran very fast, and his hair was disheveled. He looked like a lunatic, and his face was filled with extreme horror as though he had seen something unbelievable. As the person ran, he shouted, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me! I didn't see anything! I didn't see anything, brother, what's wrong?" Li Xian went forward to stop the person and pressed down on his shoulder. Li Xian wanted to ask what was going on inside the Trajectory Holy Temple to scare him so badly. However, after Li Xian pressed down on the shoulder, the person's face turned pale from fright. What happened next frightened Zhou and Li Xian. The person reached out and poked his eyes into 2 bloody holes. Then, he struggled to break free from Li Xian's grasp. As he ran, he shouted, "I didn't see anything! Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" Zhou and Li Xian were stunned. Looking at the blood dripping on the ground, they wondered if they were dreaming. "Old Zhou, I think it's fine if we don't enter the Trajectory Holy Temple. Although we aren't afraid of death, what if we become a lunatic like that fellow? That would really be a living hell." Li Xian gulped and turned to look at the Trajectory Holy Temple behind him. The way he looked at it was as though he was looking at a devil's den. That's true. Zhou felt that what Li Xian said made sense. He didn't want to become a lunatic, and he was indeed afraid of death. The Holy Land looked very safe. There were no dimensional creatures that threatened their lives, but the true danger was inside the temple. Previously, the Sun Holy Temple had nearly injured Zhou. With the Trajectory Holy Temple being so strange, Zhou felt that he didn't have to enter. The 2 of them discussed for a moment and were about to leave when they saw the lunatic who had crippled his eyes run back. His eyes were still bleeding, making him look abnormally terrifying. As he ran, he shouted, "Help! Help!" He was already blind, so he stumbled as he ran. He fell a few times before arriving in front of Zhou and company. He fell to the ground and hugged Li Xian's thigh. "Save me! I don't want to die! Save me!" Li Xian could sense that his body was trembling violently, as though something extremely terrifying was affecting his thoughts. It made his body tremble uncontrollably. "What happened? Explain yourself first." Li Xian felt apologetic towards this person, so he didn't push him away. Instead, he comforted him. Li Xian thought that if he hadn't stopped this person, he might not have crippled his eyes. Even a lunatic would be happier to be able to see than to be blind. The person hugged Li Xian's calf and said in an extremely terrified tone, "I saw a ship, a very, very big ship. Someone was killing people on it. They're all dead. They're all dead. I didn't see anything. Don't kill me. Don't kill me." The person said a few more words before he suddenly went crazy. He released Li Xian's leg and wanted to run again. Zhou reached out to pull the person. At that moment, he was blind. If he were to run and fall off the cliff, he would definitely die. Zhou grabbed the person's arm, but the person struggled with all his might. With his extraordinary strength, he broke free, but his sleeve was torn off by Zhou. When his gaze landed on the person's arm, Zhou's pupils constricted. There was a tattoo of an anchor on the person's arm. Chapter 213. This wasn't the first time Zhou had seen such an anchor symbol. Typically speaking, women were taboo to people who went out to sea in the past. Therefore, it was impossible for a woman to be engraved on an anchor. However, there was a woman's side profile on the anchor symbol, so Zhou had a deep impression of it. Zhou had never figured out what the anchor symbol meant and was rather curious about it. Now that he suddenly saw such a tattoo on a person's arm, Zhou really wanted to ask him about the origins of the anchor symbol. However, this person was a lunatic, running around like a madman. Even though he was blind, he still kept running. Who knew how many times he stumbled and fell, but he still refused to stop. He seemed to have said that he saw a ship and that someone was killing people on it. Does the anchor symbol have anything to do with the ship he mentioned? Zhou thought to himself. Looking at the ancient trajectory holy temple in the distance, Zhou suddenly realized that his previous guess might have been wrong. Most of the 6 first-generation heroes had died in the dimensional zones. Only the Dugu family's old hero was still alive. Perhaps it wasn't because he ran the fastest. From the looks of it, he must have seen something terrifying in the trajectory holy temple. Typically, there are 2 possibilities. One is that there's something terrifying in the trajectory holy temple that makes him so terrified. The other possibility is that there aren't any terrifying things in the trajectory holy temple. What he saw was only an illusion. Regardless of which it is, this doesn't seem like a test for a speed-type physique. As Zhou pondered over it, the person couldn't see anything due to his blindness. He slammed into a tree while running and fainted. Zhou walked to the lunatic and checked his injuries. He realized that they were only superficial wounds and nothing serious. He had only fainted. "Can you recognize him?" Zhou asked Li Xian. Those who could enter the Holy Land were either descendants of the 6 heroes or representatives of bigwigs. Although Zhou didn't know him, a knowledgeable person like Li Xian might recognize him. If he knew the lunatic's identity, he might be able to figure out something from him. However, Li Xian shook his head and said, "I don't know him. However, from his attire, he doesn't look like he's from the 6 families. He might be representing a bigwig somewhere." Since even Li Xian couldn't recognize him, Zhou didn't have a good solution. He said to Li Xian, "Is there any way to send him out? He's a lunatic and now he's blind. If we leave him here, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for him to survive. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do now. It's easy to enter the Holy Land, but to leave, we have to wait until the 6 holy temples choose their successors before the exit will be opened. No one can leave now," Li Xian said with a shake of his head. Zhou had the intention of taking him out and asking about this person's background, but if he had to wait that long, it didn't seem convenient to bring a lunatic along. "Let's do this. Tie him to my mount and let's take him with us. After all, I was the one who caused him to become blind. It's not good to leave him here," Li Xian said after some thought. "All right." Zhou happened to want to take him away, so he immediately agreed. Li Xian summoned a pet cow. Zhou and Li Xian carried the lunatic onto the cow's back and used a rope to secure it. Only then did they continue on their way to the other temples. After walking for a short distance, they heard the madman who was tied to the back of the cow talking. The 2 of them thought that he had woken up, but when they got closer, they saw that he was just lying there muttering to himself as if he was talking in his sleep. "Trajectory Holy Temple. I must go to the Trajectory Holy Temple. As long as I enter the Trajectory Holy Temple, I'll know what happened on the ship back then. Why did they kill each other? Why? Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I didn't see anything." His words were incoherent in his dream. At first, it was fine, but later, it turned into a nightmarish wail. Zhou listened for a while and suddenly had the urge to enter the Trajectory Holy Temple to take a look. Although this lunatic was somewhat incoherent, from what he said, it was very likely that he had indeed boarded a ship. However, something unforeseen had happened on the ship in the end. The people on the ship had killed each other, or someone had killed someone on the ship, and this person had survived. However, even the person involved didn't know what had happened on the ship back then. Therefore, he wanted to use the power of the Trajectory Holy Temple to see what had happened on the ship. If this inference was correct, then the power in the trajectory Holy Temple was very likely the ability to let people see the past. Therefore, this person wanted to use the power of the trajectory Holy Temple. In other words, it wasn't the power of the trajectory Holy Temple that made him go crazy, but he had seen what had happened on the ship in the past. As Zhou was pondering over it, the man seemed to wake up from his nightmare. He immediately straightened his body, but he was tied up and couldn't sit up at all. He could only stick to the cow's back, his body as stiff as a stick. "Who are you? What do you want?" the lunatic shouted in horror. "Brother, don't be afraid. We don't have any ill intentions. We were just afraid that you would run around crazily, so we tied you to the cow's back. When the exit opens, we will send you out of the Holy Land. Now that the treatment technology is so good, and with the power of a companion beast, your eyes will definitely be healed." Li Xian didn't care if he could understand him, as he said a lot. The person seemed to sober up a little and wasn't as afraid as before. However, he was still a little agitated as he shouted, "I don't want to go out. Let me go. I want to enter the trajectory Holy Temple." Zhou and Li Xian exchanged looks and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. This person had been so afraid that he had nearly committed suicide, but now, he was clamoring to return to the trajectory Holy Temple. They really didn't know what he was up to. "Brother, don't be agitated. You just came out of the trajectory Holy Temple. Why do you want to enter again?" Li Xian asked curiously. I want. The lunatic thought for a long time, but he couldn't figure it out. Then, he suddenly froze and said in a daze, "What do I want? What do I want?" This person is really crazy. Li Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Zhou looked at the lunatic with a frown. He really wanted to know about this lunatic, but from the looks of it, it was impossible. This fellow's brain was completely damaged. The lunatic suddenly broke the rope and jumped off the cow's back. He ran in the direction of the trajectory Holy Temple at a surprisingly fast speed. Zhou and Li Xian failed to react in time. Chapter 214. Xia Bing, Duguchuan, and company gathered together with ugly expressions. There were 70 to 80 people from the 6 families who had entered the Holy Land. Now, more than 30 of them had their primordial energy seas crippled by Zhou. This was because some of their primordial energy seas weren't in their lower dantians. Otherwise, the number would have been even higher. Zhou is like another Tianzhua. If we let him leave the Holy Land, our 6 families' reputation will be gone. John's face was pale, but he was flushed with excitement. So what if we don't let him leave? Do any of you have a way to restrain his companion bird? Xiaobing said coldly. I'm not afraid of those flames, but I'm not Zhou Wen's match alone. This fellow's companion beast is just too powerful. The Yin family has controlled the primordial gold mine for so many years and is already filthy rich. In terms of wealth, they aren't much inferior to us 6 families. From the looks of it, they have invested a lot this time. It's obvious that they are here to smack us in the face, Duguchuan said with a sigh. He believed that everything about Zhou had been arranged by the Yin family. If I had known this would happen, I would have made more preparations. In terms of companion beasts, our family isn't inferior to him. It's not impossible to forcefully incubate a few epic companion beasts. At most, we'll just have to pay a small price. Prose was furious and hateful. His primordial energy sea wasn't in his lower dantian, so he wasn't crippled. However, being stabbed in the abdomen by Zhou left him feeling terrible. What's the point of knowing? If I had known, I would have cried like a woman and hung myself to get that mythical companion egg from my aunt. How could I have allowed Zhou to be so arrogant? Duguchuan said gloomily. Many of the 6 families had produced special physique. Those special physiques allowed them to explore certain dimensional zones. If their physiques were compatible, they would obtain a mythical companion egg like Zhou at Small Buddha Temple. A few families had obtained mythical companion eggs in the past. However, mythical companion eggs were only at the mortal stage when they hatched. They needed to be fed and evolved bit by bit. As for whether they could advance to the mythical stage, it was still an unknown. Over the years, those who could truly raise a companion egg to the mythical stage were rare even in the 6 families. Duguchuan had inherited the Dugu family's body of trajectory, so he had a chance of incubating a mythical pet. However, it wasn't safe enough. Therefore, Duguchuan's aunt hadn't given him the mythical egg she had obtained in the dimensional zone. Pros glanced at Xia Bing and said, "Xia Bing has the foresight. That calabash should be a mythical companion beast, right? Now isn't the time to talk about this. Let's first think of how to deal with Zhouwen," Xia Bing said indifferently without answering Pros's question. "What else are you thinking about? We don't have any powerful companion beasts that can fight Zhouwen. It's useless no matter what we think of. In the Holy Land, only one of our 6 families can defeat Zhouwen," John said. "Are you talking about Lance?" Xia Bing frowned. "He's the only one." John nodded. "But didn't you say that Lance had already refused? With his personality, it's impossible for him to take action again," Xia Bing said. "That was then and this is now. Someone in their family has had their essence energy C crippled by Zhouwen. Even if Lance doesn't help us, does he not care about his own blood relatives?" John said. Xia Bing and company exchanged looks and felt that John's words made sense. "Although that's true, you know Lance's personality. He's especially odd. It might not work. Let's go find Lance and give it a try," Duguchuan said as he prepared to get up. "Wait a minute. After you find Lance, tell him that Zhouwen has 2 mythical pets," John suddenly said. Duguchuan and company were slightly taken aback. Although Zhouwen's companion beasts were powerful, they didn't think in the direction of a mythical pet. They only believed that Zhouwen had used some special method to incubate an epic companion egg. This was because without a special physique, it was impossible for one to obtain a mythical companion egg, much less hatch one. Zhouwen wasn't of the 6 families' bloodline, so it was impossible for him to have a special physique. How could he have a mythical pet? Therefore, they believed that Zhouwen's companion beasts were only of high levels and powerful skills. "Zhouwen's bird and fan are mythical companion beasts?" Duguchuan asked as he stared at John. "Is it that important? Isn't it fine as long as Lance is interested?" John said with a smile. Duguchuan immediately understood and nodded slightly. "All right. I think those 2 pets are indeed extraordinary. They have the looks of mythical pets." When Duguchuan led his men to find Lance, Zhouwen and Li Xian sat in front of the Trajectory Holy Temple's door and waited. The blind lunatic had actually rushed into the Trajectory Holy Temple again. They wanted to wait for the lunatic to come out and see what was going on. "Old Zhou, do you think that lunatic's words are reliable? If it's really as he said, then wouldn't the power in the Trajectory Holy Temple allow people to see the past?" Li Xian said casually since he was bored. "I don't know. I'll only know after I enter." Zhouwen stared at the door of the Trajectory Holy Temple. He was already tempted, but he didn't want to take the risk. He had already searched the entire Trajectory Holy Temple, but he didn't find the tiny palm symbol. There was no way for him to download this place into the phone game. Strange, why don't the dimensional zones in the Holy Land have the tiny palm symbol? Zhouwen was somewhat depressed. If he could download it into the game on his phone, he could enter all the temples without any qualms. "I think he's a lunatic. He's definitely spouting nonsense. Think about it. Although the Federation controls the entire Earth in name, it doesn't dare go to the sea, much less go out on a ship. That lunatic is about the same age as us. He's definitely still a student. With his age, how can he take a ship out to sea? Therefore, what he said must be an illusion he saw in the Trajectory Holy Temple," Li Xian said. Li Xian's words reminded Zhou Wen that taking a ship out to sea was probably something that happened before the dimensional storms descended. After the dimensional storms, even an aircraft carrier would never return, much less an ordinary tanker. It was impossible for ordinary people to take a ship out to sea. This lunatic was just like them, a young man participating in the trial. At his age, even if his family's elders had the ability to go out to sea, they definitely wouldn't dare take him out. Could it be that the power in the trajectory holy temple is just an illusion? Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss after some thought. The anchor symbol on the lunatic's arm had always bothered him. Furthermore, the lunatic had said that he wanted to use the power of the trajectory holy temple to see what had happened in the past. From the looks of it, I can only know if that lunatic's words are true by entering the trajectory holy temple myself. As Zhou Wen was pondering over it, the door to the trajectory holy temple slowly opened. The lunatic was slumped inside the door with one hand on the sill. He didn't move at all, and it was unknown if he was dead or unconscious. Chapter 2:15. Zhou Wen and Li Xian hurriedly went over and pulled the lunatic's hand, hoping to pull him out of the door. When they went over, the two of them were already very careful. They didn't cross the threshold. As long as they didn't cross the threshold, it wouldn't be considered as entering the temple's trial. However, just as Zhou Wen held the lunatic's hand, he felt a strange force coming from the trajectory holy temple, forcefully pulling him in. Zhou Wen immediately felt that something was amiss. He and Li Xian had clearly held the lunatic's hand at the same time, but neither of them had crossed the threshold. Why was Li Xian fine, but he was pulled into the door by a force? Li Xian reached out to pull Zhou Wen, but it was already too late. After Zhou Wen was sucked into the door, with a bang, the door to the trajectory holy temple automatically closed, isolating Li Xian outside. Seeing that he and the lunatic had been locked in the door, Zhou Wen pulled the lunatic and turned to walk to the back. Typically, even if the trial had already begun, one could choose to withdraw. However, when Zhou Wen turned around, he was stunned. There was no stone door behind him. Not only was there no stone door, but there was nothing at a glance. There was only a road that led straight into the distance. At the end of the road was the blue sky and white clouds. Zhou Wen turned his body 360 degrees and immediately realized that he and the lunatic were standing at a crossroad. All four directions were straight roads that led to the horizon. Apart from the roads, there was nothing else but an endless grassland. The temple and the stone walls didn't exist at all. What's going on? Is the test to let us choose a path? But the roads are the same in all four directions. How can we choose? Do you need to give us some hints? Zhou Wen shouted at the sky. There was definitely a creature in the temple controlling everything. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been pulled in. However, Zhou Wen didn't hear any response after waiting for a while. At that moment, the unconscious lunatic woke up. He rubbed his head and sat up. Then, he sized up his surroundings with a puzzled expression. What is this place? The lunatic didn't look crazy as he asked. Haven't you already been in the trajectory holy temple twice? Zhou Wen looked at him with an odd expression. This was because he had clearly blinded his eyes, but they were now intact. This is the trajectory holy temple? Isn't there a ship in the trajectory holy temple? The madman wore a look of surprise as he stared at Zhou Wen suspiciously, as though he was trying to determine if Zhou Wen was telling the truth. You saw a ship when you entered the trajectory holy temple? Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss. If the ship was really an illusion that the lunatic had seen, he reckoned that it would be difficult for him to get anything out of the lunatic. Yes, it's a ship. When the ship was mentioned, the expression on Madman's face began to change again, but fortunately, it didn't explode like before. Zhou Wen hurriedly changed the topic and pointed at the anchor tattoo on his arm. This tattoo of yours is rather interesting. Does it have any special meaning? Madman seemed very confused and subconsciously answered, This was tattooed by my dad when I was young. He was a sailor, and he said that this was the symbol of his ship. When I grow up, I can become a sailor like him and work on his ship. Is there still a profession like a sailor? Zhou asked in puzzlement. According to what he knew, no ship had dared to go into the sea in recent decades. Even if someone did, it would be an epic expert driving a companion beast. There was no need for a ship, much less a sailor. Yes, why not? Our hometown has many fishing boats. We go out to sea every day to fish. However, my dad's ship is a little different. It's a ship that travels long distances. It passes through many countries and sells different goods in different countries. The madman looked much more clear-headed. Wait, did you say countries? Zhou stared at the madman with an odd expression, wanting to confirm if he was fooling him. Countries were a concept before the dimensional storms. After the dimensional storms, there was only the Federation and no countries. Humans had united to survive the calamity. That's right. Is there something wrong? The madman looked at Zhou in surprise as though what he said was only right. Brother, how old are you? Zhou asked. 17. Why are you asking this? The madman asked in puzzlement. Then you must be joking with me, right? After the dimensional storms, how can there be any countries? The sea is filled with dimensional zones. No one dares to go into the sea, much less fish. It's already not bad if they aren't eaten by fish, Zhou said. What do you mean? What federation? What dimensional storms? The way the madman looked at Zhou was the same as how he had looked at him previously. It was as though he was looking at a lunatic. All right, don't tell me that you were born before the dimensional storms. Zhou frowned at the madman, feeling that this person was messing with him. Perhaps he wasn't crazy from the beginning. However, the madman looked at Zhou seriously and said, I don't know what you mean. My name is Ali. I was born in Langya town, not far from the sea. I came here to at this point, Ali was stunned as though he couldn't remember why he had come here. Zhou didn't know if this person was really crazy or faking it, so he asked, How do you know about the Holy Land and how did you come here? What Holy Land? Isn't this the 6 Tao temples? Ali asked curiously. 6 Tao temples? Zhou was also dumbfounded. He felt like he was communicating with an alien, and he had no idea what the other party was talking about. That's right. It's the 6 Tao temples. This is... Ali realized that he couldn't remember. He rubbed his head, but he still couldn't recall anything. You know that this is the Trajectory Holy Temple, right? Zhou asked again. That's right. This is one of the 6 Tao temples, the Trajectory Holy Temple, Ali answered with certainty. Then do you still remember why you came here? Zhou continued asking. Ali thought for a moment as his expression gradually turned nasty. I seem to remember that I followed Dad onto his ship, and then we encountered a storm, and then, at this point, Ali suddenly hugged his head and screamed. Soon, he fell to the ground and kept convulsing. After a while, he fainted again. Zhou checked his body and realized that he wasn't faking it. He had really fainted. His expression turned odd. What's going on with this fellow? Could it be that he really... Impossible. He's only 17 years old. Impossible. Zhou looked at Ali as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Ali didn't wake up, so Zhou had no choice but to think of a way to leave. However, all he could see was the straight road in 4 directions. Zhou summoned the mutated lotus flower ant and got it to carry Ali in one direction. Chapter 216. There was no concept of north, south, east, and west here. Zhou carefully observed for a long time, but he didn't discover any differences in the 4 directions. All he could do was randomly choose one. Now, passing the trial was no longer a consideration for Zhou. All he wanted to do was leave this place as soon as possible. After leaving the Holy Land, he would get the League officials to investigate Ali's origins. Everyone who entered the Holy Land had information record. If he had entered at that time, there would definitely be information on him. If I don't have his information. The corners of Zhou Wen's eyes twitched when he thought of this. The road seemed endless as it extended all the way to the end of the horizon. Zhou Wen walked for more than an hour, but the surrounding scenery didn't change at all. Suddenly, Zhou Wen realized that something was different in front of him. He sped up and continued walking forward. He realized that another intersection had appeared in front of him. It looked no different from the intersection he had set off from. The only difference was that there was an additional stone statue in the middle of the intersection. The stone statue was a 3 to 4 meter tall root. All 4 directions of the root were faces. The stone statue's face that was facing Zhou Wen actually said, "Congratulations, human. You have completed the test. You can become the spokesperson of the Trajectory Holy Temple in the human world." The moment the stone statue said that, Zhou Wen felt a strong sense of disgust from the side of the king. Even his emotions were affected. Zhou Wen suppressed his emotions and looked at the stone face. "Sorry, I didn't plan on becoming the spokesperson of the Trajectory Holy Temple. I only accidentally entered this place to bring a friend out." Zhou Wen cursed inwardly. "It's clear that you were the ones who forcefully pulled me in. Furthermore, how is this a trial? It's a forced selection. Since you're already here, why don't you think about it a little? Become the spokesperson of the Trajectory Holy Temple in the human world. Not only can you obtain the Trajectory Holy Body, but you can also obtain a mythical companion beast that matches it," the stone face added. "Thank you for your kind intentions, but I already have my own goal. The Trajectory Holy Temple isn't my choice. Please open the door and let us leave this place." Zhou Wen increasingly felt that this fellow was up to no good. He had ulterior motives for being so solicitous for no reason. The stone face didn't say anything else. Its originally expressive face slowly stiffened, turning into a lifeless stone statue. Zhou Wen shouted a few more times, but the stone statue didn't react at all. It was as though it was an ordinary stone statue. Zhou Wen thought for a moment before circling around the stone statue and continuing forward. After walking for a while, another intersection appeared in front of him. In the middle of the intersection was still the 4-faced stone pillar. Zhou Wen sized up his surroundings and felt that this was the intersection he had previously passed. He couldn't help but frown slightly, but the stone statue didn't react. All he could do was change directions and continue walking forward. Soon, Zhou Wen realized that no matter which direction he walked in, he would eventually return to the 4-faced stone pillar. It was as though this place was an endless samsara. Alai, who was on the mutated lotus flower ant's back, woke up and asked while rubbing his eyes, "Why are we still here?" Zhou Wen looked at Alai and suddenly had a thought. "You previously said that when you entered the Trajectory Holy Temple, there was a ship inside?" "Yes, it's a ship. It's identical to the ship my dad works on," Alai answered. "You used to be on your dad's ship, right?" Zhou Wen asked again. "That's right. On the first day after high school graduation, my dad took me on the ship," Alai answered. "Then take a closer look. Have you been here before? Have you seen it before?" Zhou Wen said as he pointed at the 4-faced stone pillar. Alai looked at it for a while and answered with certainty, "No, I've never seen it before." After Zhou Wen heard that, he seemed to understand something as he frowned in thought. From Alai's situation, people who enter the Trajectory Holy Temple should be trapped in their memories. However, since Alai hasn't been here before, nor has he seen the 4-faced stone pillar, it's very likely that this is my memory. However, I don't think I've been to such a place before, right? Guide City, where Zhou Wen was born, was a plain. Even if there were large tracts of land there, they were all field. It was impossible for there to be such a large grassland. Zhou Wen was certain that he had never been here before. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Wen suddenly pulled out his bamboo blade and slashed at the 4-faced stone statue. The bamboo blade was extremely sharp. When it slashed at the stone pillar, It split the stone statue into two. However, the broken stone statue vanished with a bang. The surrounding roads and grassland vanished as well. When Zhou saw the scene in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but break out into a cold sweat. He was indeed standing at a crossroad. However, this crossroad wasn't built on a grassland, but on a volcanic magma pool. If Zhou hadn't followed the path and stepped onto the grassland, he would probably have fallen into the magma pool. In the middle of the crossroad was a stone platform. On the stone platform floated a black seed. It looked like it was condensed from the night sky as it emitted a strange and mysterious aura. This aura was similar to the sun god crystal that Zhou had previously obtained, but it was somewhat different. Zhou attempted to grab the seed with his hand, but nothing special happened. The black seed was easily removed by him. Boom! The instant the black seed was plucked by Zhou, the entire temple trembled. The door opened once again and Zhou saw Li Xian standing outside. He hurriedly left the Trajectory Temple with Alai. Indeed, he saw the Trajectory Temple glow brightly. Many carvings emitted a strange black fog. It was a sign that the Trajectory Temple already had a successor. From now on, the Trajectory Temple would be completely closed until the next Holy Land opening. Old Zhou, don't you have a body compatible with the Sun God Temple? How did you pass the Trajectory Temple's trial? Li Xian looked at Zhou in surprise. I don't know what's going on either. I find it somewhat baffling. Zhou looked at the black seed in his hand and felt that something was amiss. He felt that this black seed had been given to him by the Trajectory Temple and not something he had truly obtained through the trial. At the very least, he wasn't trapped in his memories. Zhou even suspected that the four-faced stone statue's words weren't a test or an illusion. Instead, it was really trying to rope him in. Who cares? It's better to have something than nothing. If the people from the 6 families know that you have directly obtained the recognition of 2 temples, I believe their expressions will be very interesting, Li Xian said with a chuckle. There's nothing to flaunt about. Zhou got Li Xian to watch Alai as he secretly took a picture of the black seed with his phone and sent it into the game. He had a nagging feeling that the Trajectory Temple was strange, so he didn't dare directly absorb the black seed. Chapter 217. Trajectory God Power Crystal. Formed from the God of Trajectory's Blood Essence Crystal. Fusing it can strengthen one's bloodline. Seeing that there were no problems with the game's judgment, Zhou got the blood-colored avatar to absorb the Trajectory God Power Crystal. As the black power was refined by the blood-colored avatar, its stats changed again. The speed stat increased to 21 points, and there was an annotation of the word trajectory. The Trajectory Holy Temple actually increases speed. It was really a fluke. Zhou was secretly amused. Although he had previously believed that the Trajectory Holy Temple corresponded to speed, the situation inside was completely different from what he had imagined. Even Zhou was surprised that the Trajectory God Power Crystal could increase speed. Zhou and Li Xian asked Alai many more questions, but he seemed to have forgotten many things. He only remembered that he came from a place called Langya Town and that his father was a sailor. After he graduated from high school, he boarded a ship with his father and encountered a storm at sea. He couldn't remember anything after that. Zhou had some doubts about Alai and planned on taking him out in the future to figure out his origins. However, before that, he had to wait until the Holy Land's trial ended. Zhou originally wanted to head to the other temples to obtain God Power Crystals and raise all 4 of his stats to 21 points. However, when they arrived at the other temples, they realized that they had been completely closed. Clearly, the God Power Crystals had been taken away by others. There are indeed hidden talents in the League. It's only been a few days, but the God Power Crystals have been snatched away. Zhou was somewhat worried for Li Xian. If the Khanate Infinite Body was also snatched away, Li Xian would have no hope. Just as he was pondering over it, he suddenly heard a thunderclap in the sky. The wind and clouds churned as though a hole had collapsed in the sky, forming a huge vortex. Zhou and company involuntarily flew towards the vortex. They could also see figures flying into the sky from all directions of the Holy Land and being sucked into the vortex. Zhou didn't resist the vortex's suction force and allowed himself to fly into it. He even patted Li Xian on the shoulder. There was only one possibility for such a situation to happen. The god power crystals of the 6 temples had been snatched away, so it ended early and opened the passageway to leave the Holy Land. However, Li Xian didn't mind. Since I can't obtain it, it means that I'm not fated to have it. It's no big deal even if I don't have a special physique. I'll rely on my immortal god of combat life providence to forge my own path. You're right. Not having a special physique might not be a bad thing. Zhou had a nagging feeling that the 6 holy temples were a little odd. Alright, there's no need to console me. I've suffered many setbacks since I was young. Such a trivial matter isn't enough to make me depressed. Li Xian imagined that Zhou was consoling him. Zhou didn't explain. After all, everyone wanted a special physique. He didn't have any evidence and was just guessing. It was useless to explain. Together with Alai, the trio flew towards the vortex. When they arrived near the vortex, they happened to see Prose being sucked up as well. Prose even glared at Zhou. Zhou, don't celebrate too early. This matter isn't over yet, Prose said as he was sucked into the vortex. Zhou and company were also sucked in. Soon, they returned to the stone altar from before. Zhou originally wanted to take Alai to check their identities, but he realized that many young people hadn't left the altar. Instead, they surrounded it. Their targets were clearly him and Li Xian. What are you guys doing here? Hurry up and make way. Do you want to fight here? Li Xian said with a twitch of his lips. Now that they were out, they could do whatever they wanted in the Holy Land, but they had to be restrained by the League's laws after coming out. Although the 6 families enjoyed special privileges, they didn't have the privilege to openly beat up a representative of the Yin family. Lance, it's him. No one bothered with Li Xian as Hardadef pointed at Zhou and said to Lance. You're Zhou? Lance looked at Zhou in surprise. Your name is Lance? Zhou was also somewhat surprised. Before coming, Jiang Yan had warned him that the only person he needed to be afraid of was a person named Lance. Were you the one who crippled their primordial energy seas? Lance asked Zhou. Yes, but they were the ones who came to find trouble with me first. Zhou originally didn't plan on explaining, but after glancing at Lance, he still explained. Lance nodded. Actually, that's not important. I want to fight you. You can choose the location and time. Because I'm the representative of the Yin family? Zhou knew that Lance cultivated with the goal of defeating Tianzhua. It's not for anyone. It's just because you are Zhou. Apart from Tianzhua, you are the second person I'm interested in. I didn't plan on taking action when they called me over, but since you are Zhou, I'm interested in fighting you, Lance said. But I don't want to fight you. Fighting is very troublesome, Zhou said as he spread out his hands. He wasn't a battle maniac like Feng Qiuyan. He really wasn't interested in fighting without any practical value. If he had the time, Zhou would rather game for a while. Fight me. Regardless of victory or defeat, I'll ensure that you leave Holy City safely. Otherwise, you will still be in trouble. Those fellows won't let you off easily. Compared to fighting me, those fellows will take up more of your gaming time, right? Lance suddenly approached Zhou and whispered into his ear in a voice only he could hear. It looks like I can't reject it. However, I'll be the one to choose the time and place, Zhou said with a shrug. Lance's words were half-truths, but there was one thing he was right about. The fellows from the 6 families definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. Holy City was their best opportunity, so they definitely wouldn't let Zhou leave so easily. Although Zhou didn't expect Lance to really send him away, It was good to stall for time so that Ah Xing could be prepared. Within 2 days. You can choose the time and place, Lance said. Lance, 2 days is too long. John immediately turned anxious. He was afraid that Zhou Wen would take the opportunity to escape. However, Lance only smiled and said, "He won't run. Don't worry. There's no need for 2 days. Let's do it tomorrow at noon." "I still want to go home early after the fight," Zhou Wen said. "All right, where is it?" Lance asked. "I'll inform you when the time comes." Zhou Wen didn't answer directly. He planned on returning to get Ah Xing to choose the location. With Ah Xing's abilities, he would definitely be able to choose the most suitable place. Chapter 218. In the hotel room, Ah Xing looked at Zhou Wen with an odd expression. "That's what happened. Is there a problem?" Zhou Wen recounted his experience in the Holy Land. "No problem. Don't worry. Leave the rest to me," Ah Xing said without any hesitation. "All right, I'll go back and prepare." As Zhou Wen spoke, he prepared to return to his room and absorb the mutated fairy's primordial energy skill crystal. Previously, Zhou Wen couldn't cultivate it due to his stats. Now that his speed had risen to 21, he had met the requirement. He could cultivate it before fighting Lance. "Young Master One, you have to be careful of Lance. Although his reputation outside is inferior to John's, those who truly understand the current situation of the 6 families know that Lance is the most terrifying person in this generation of the 6 families," Ah Xing said. "I know." Even if Ah Xing didn't say it, Zhou Wen could sense it. "He also has a nickname, Voiceless," Ah Xing continued. "Why is he called Voiceless? Is the primordial energy art he cultivates related to sound?" Zhou Wen asked curiously. Ah Xing said, "There are all kinds of voices in the world. Every voice has its own unique rhythm and charm. Every life has the right to produce a voice that belongs to them to prove that they are part of this world. It's just that some voices are loud enough, while others are relatively soft." Zhou Wen didn't directly say why Lance's nickname was Voiceless, but he already understood. Voiceless probably meant that when he produced a voice, the entire world would fall silent. There would be no other noise, leaving only his voice. After returning to his room, Zhou Wen took out the mutated fairy's primordial energy skill crystal and filmed it into the game. The blood-colored avatar held the mutated fairy crystal and chose to absorb it, but it was notified that it couldn't be absorbed. Zhou Wen switched his primordial energy art to the small perfection of Wisdom Sutra, removing the notification that he couldn't absorb it. The crystal immediately transformed into wisps of black and white aura that fused into the blood-colored avatar's body. Zhou Wen felt as though there was a faint immortal aura flowing through his body. It was as though his body was a hydrogen balloon that was about to float up. After a while, the feeling gradually disappeared. Only when everything returned to normal did the in-game system give a new notification. Absorbed mutated fairy crystal. Attained transcendent flying immortal. Zhou Wen glanced at the blood-colored avatar's information. Indeed, there was an additional transcendent flying immortal skill in the primordial energy skills column. It wasn't the Dragon Gate flying immortal skill that Zhou Wen knew. Is this transcendent flying immortal a primordial energy skill that only mutated fairies have? Could it be a mutated version of the Dragon Gate flying immortal skill? Zhou Wen hurriedly looked at Transcendent Flying Immortal's introduction. Although the other skills of the mutated fairy were very powerful, what Zhou Wen wanted the most was the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill. There were countless primordial energy skills in the world, and there were countless primordial energy skills with immense destructive power. They only had one effect: to defeat or kill the enemy. However, Zhou Wen didn't like killing. Furthermore, he cherished his life very much. A primordial energy skill like the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill was undoubtedly the best life preservation skill. If he couldn't beat the enemy, he could run. If the enemy couldn't catch up to him, it would be useless no matter how strong they were. Transcendent Flying Immortal, Ascension Technique of Transcendent Immortals. The introduction was very vague, but it was likely a primordial energy skill similar to the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill. Zhou carefully sensed the information he had obtained about Transcendent Flying Immortal as he looked pleasantly surprised. The next morning, when he woke up for breakfast, Zhou saw Li Xian and Lai sitting at a table talking. Zhou originally wanted to investigate Lai's origins, but the ruckus caused by the 6 families yesterday had delayed this matter. Lai had returned to the hotel with them. On the way back, Zhou recalled this matter. He originally wanted to take Lai to the officials to investigate the identity he had used to enter the Holy Land, but after telling Sheng about it, Sheng told Zhou that there was no need to go. There was no such person on the Holy Land's selection list. Sheng was very certain when he said this. If it was someone on the list, it was impossible for him not to have seen him before. This left Zhou puzzled. If Sheng really wasn't one of the people who had entered the Holy Land, where did he come from? And why was he in the Trajectory Holy Temple? Sheng, what plans do you have for the future? Are you interested in following me? There's definitely nothing wrong with following me. I guarantee you that you will have a good life every day and have endless amounts of beautiful chicks to sleep with. Li Xian seemed to be trying to entice Lai. Lai said with a strange expression, "Why has the world become like this? It doesn't matter what the world has become. A man has the world as his home. It's the same no matter where he goes. If you follow me in the future, I guarantee that you will have a much better future than being a sailor," Li Xian said as he patted Lai on the shoulder. Zhou found it odd when he heard that. Although Li Xian wasn't a bad person, he wasn't good enough to be a philanthropist. This wasn't like his character at all. Lai didn't answer. When he saw Zhou walk over, he said, "Zhou, you said that I came out of the Trajectory Holy Temple. You have also entered the Trajectory Holy Temple. Do you know why I was inside? You seem to have entered the Trajectory Holy Temple to investigate what happened on your father's ship. I don't know anything else. Don't you remember anything?" Zhou asked. Lai shook his head. "I only remember that my father's ship encountered a storm. I can't remember anything else. There's no rush. You can think about it slowly. Li Xian isn't a bad person. If you don't have anywhere to go, why don't you go to his place first? After all, he's rich. There's no need to be afraid of going broke," Zhou said. That's right. Come eat and drink from me. I guarantee that everything will be the best." Li Xian didn't retort at all, making Zhou even more puzzled. After breakfast, Lai wanted to take a walk and see what the world was like, so he went out alone. Seeing Lai walk away, Zhou asked Li Xian, "Why are you so enthusiastic? This isn't like you. Be honest, what are you up to?" "Heavens, haven't you realized it?" Li Xian said exaggeratedly as he looked at Zhou. "Realized what?" Zhou asked with a frown. "That fellow Lai is very strong." Li Xian seemed to feel that this description wasn't enough as he added, "He's especially strong. At the very least, he's stronger than us." "What do you mean?" Zhou asked in puzzlement. Lai didn't seem to have shown any special combat abilities. "Didn't I use a rope to tie him to the back of my companion beast? That rope was formed from a legendary 9-scaled segmented snake. If I were bound by it, I wouldn't be able to break free. As for that Lai, he easily snapped the 9-scaled segmented snake. It looked very easy." Li Xian said, "Now that this fellow has lost his memories and has nowhere to go, I'll take him in. He'll help me do something. Isn't that perfect?" Chapter 219. Little Lin's Pet Arena was the venue chosen by Sheng. Many of the younger generation from the 6 families had come to the arena. Among them, there was no lack of mid-tier forces in their 20s or 30s. Back then, Tianzhua had suppressed and crippled that generation. Now, another Zhou had appeared. He had crippled more than 30 people from the 6 families. This was a huge humiliation to the 6 families. Thankfully, the 6 families have produced Lance in this generation. Otherwise, we would have to swallow our pride like back then, Xia Bing said with a complicated expression as she glanced at Lance, who was sitting in the resting area. She had always wanted to chase up to or even surpass Lance, but no matter how hard she tried, the distance between her and Lance only widened. She was almost unable to see Lance's back. Lance clearly didn't inherit the physique of a hero, nor did he cultivate the family's primordial energy art. However, he left everyone in the dust, making it impossible for others to even have the thought of catching up to him. Thankfully, there's only one Lance in this world. Xia Bing sighed inwardly, unsure if she was feeling sad for herself or rejoicing. He's here, Dugu Chuan suddenly said. Xia Bing turned to look and indeed, she saw Zhou Wen arrive at the arena with Ah Sheng and Li Xian. Ah Sheng and Li Xian stayed in the spectator stands while Zhou Wen walked into the arena alone. When Lance saw Zhou Wen, he stood up from the bench in the resting area and walked towards the arena. The descendants of the 6 families were rather calm. Perhaps outsiders might think that Zhou Wen still had a chance, but from their point of view, Zhou Wen had no chance at all. No one below the epic stage was Lance's match. Even those at the epic stage might not be able to defeat him. In a corner of the spectator stands sat a man and a woman. Both of them wore hats and sunglasses that covered most of their faces. However, anyone familiar with them would be able to recognize them as Liz and Qiao Xiyuan. What do you think? Qiao Xiyuan asked Zhou Wen and Lance. Liz said with a dark expression, Lance is a talented genius. No one in his generation can be better than him. It's impossible for Zhou Wen to win. Qiao Xiyuan said indifferently, don't forget that Zhou Wen is someone who has interacted with Jing Daoxian. If he really catches Jing Daoxian's eye, do you still think Lance will definitely win? Yes. Liz said with certainty, Minister, you aren't from the 6 families, so you might not understand Lance very well. His talent is unparalleled. Unless it's absolute strength, no one can defeat him. Qiao Xiyuan only smiled and didn't refute Liz's words. Instead he asked, confirm again. Is everyone in place? Liz nodded slightly and contacted the Special Investigation Bureau personnel scattered around the arena to confirm that they had arrived. Minister, everything is in place. Zhou Wen won't be able to escape today, Liz said to Qiao Xiyuan. Qiao Xiyuan didn't say a word. All he did was look at Ah Sheng, who was sitting in the stands. Ah Sheng was wearing a trench coat and a hat. He was seriously watching the situation in the arena, as though he wasn't paying any attention to them. With that person around, I'm afraid this mission won't be easy to complete. If I had a few people like Xing by my side instead of Liz, I wouldn't be so tired. Qiao Xiyuan sighed inwardly. There were too many people with special privileges in the Special Investigation Bureau. Every one of the 6 families wished to have their own people in the Bureau, but it was hard to say how capable those people were. Although there were indeed many outstanding people in the 6 great families, their origins made them too proud. Sometimes it was difficult for them to truly become good inspectors. A good inspector isn't as simple as being powerful. However, there are pros and cons. Without these people in the Bureau wouldn't have such great privileges. Qiao Xiyuan turned to look at Liz and said, get someone to keep an eye on Xing at all times. If he does anything out of the ordinary, report it immediately, no matter how minute the details are. In fact, Qiao Xiyuan was also looking forward to the day when these people from the 6 great clans would learn to give up their pride and self-esteem under his guidance. When that day came, they might become the most terrifying inspectors. However, Liz didn't think much of it. He's only in Tian's was adjutant. What else can he do with us watching him? Qiao Xiyuan could only patiently explain, don't underestimate Xing. He's been in charge of the in-family security for the past few years. Every year, countless people target the in-family, but the Yin family has never had any problems. Such a person definitely can't be underestimated. Do you know what his other nickname is in Luoyang's military? Devil Adjutant. Mentioning his name in the military is more useful than in Tianzhua. Although Liz felt that Holy City was their territory and that an adjutant who was being watched couldn't do anything, Qiao Xiyuan was her superior after all. Therefore, Liz immediately contacted the people watching in Sheng and exhorted them a few more things. In the arena, Zhou walked in front of Lance without any weapons in hand. He had placed the bamboo blade into the chaos space, but he had no intention of using it. The bamboo blade had to see blood when it was drawn, otherwise it would backfire on its owner. Although Zhou didn't believe in such a thing, he felt that there was no need to draw his saber. This was because he wasn't good at saber technique. The sharp bamboo blade could be used to torture vegetables, but in a battle with Lance, it would instead become a flaw. They said that you have 2 mythical pets. Is that true? Lance asked Zhou. Is there a difference? I don't plan on using pets, Zhou said. Lance smiled brightly, revealing 2 rows of snow-white teeth. I'm already starting to look forward to it. In that case, let's hurry up. I'm still planning on returning home to game. Zhou took a step forward and struck Lance with the first move of the 7 distribution palm, Clear Conscience. Clear Conscience was an extremely firm and young move. It was a wide-open move, and this move actually didn't match the Ashen Palm's strength that Zhou practiced. However, Zhou still fused the Ashen Palm's strength into this move. Lance didn't dodge as he similarly struck out with his palm. His palm was purplish-red, and it looked like a special primordial energy skill. Bam! Zhou felt a stabbing pain in his palm as he couldn't help but retreat. However, Lance's chest trembled as he took 2 steps back. Zhou glanced at his palm and saw that it was covered in blood as though it had been pricked by countless needles. He couldn't help but say, "What a vicious primordial energy skill." Likewise, "Your primordial energy skill is also very sinister," Lance said with a smile. Chapter 220. Zhou used the 7 moves of the 7 distribution palm one by one. The 7 moves weren't connected and their styles were completely different. When Zhou used them consecutively, it was easy for his opponent to adapt to the change in style. However, Lance didn't seem to feel anything. He dealt with every move and blocked all 7 of Zhou's palms. Apart from the first palm, the Ashen Palm hidden in the 7 distribution palm failed to injure Lance. When the feminine hidden force touched Lance's palm, it was immediately dispersed, unable to enter his body. After delivering the 7 palms, Zhou retracted his hand and retreated. Then, he said to Lance, "I only know these 7 palms. Since you have cracked all 7, I can only admit defeat." "You can admit defeat, but you have to let me have my fill first." Lance ignored Zhou's words and charged forward, striking out with a Wind Lightning Fist. Wind Lightning Fist was a relatively common fist-type primordial energy skill in the region where Lance was. The power of the punch contained the might of wind and lightning. It didn't require any powerful technique, just strength to subdue the enemy. Zhou also knew that it was impossible for Lance to let him off so easily. Seeing Lance's punch coming at him, he dispelled the Dragon Gate Fairy skill and circled around Lance. After Zhou learned Transcendent Flying Immortal, the Dragon Gate Fairy skill didn't replace it. Clearly, it wasn't a primordial energy skill. There were still some differences between the 2. Indeed, Zhou only knew the 7 palm moves. He had no time to learn other technique. Upon seeing Zhou dodge, Liz sneered and said, "Zhou is doomed." In front of Lance, retreating is equivalent to defeat. It wasn't just Liz. Xia Bing, Duguchuan, and the others who had fought Lance knew how terrifying it was to let Lance take the initiative to attack. No one could remain undefeated under his attacks. Duguchuan's movement technique was considered top-notch among his peers, but he only managed to last about 10 moves under Lance's attacks. With just 2 punches, Zhou Wen could sense the pressure Lance gave him. Lance's attack style was very unique, something he had never seen before. Although combo punches were very common in martial arts, when it came to real combat, combo punches weren't very useful. Unless you could hit your opponent with the first punch and make them unable to defend, then you would have a chance to use the following combo punches. But if the first punch could hit, then it would be enough to knock him down with a single punch. Why would there be a need for the subsequent punches? Therefore, the combination punch was actually just a supplement. What really mattered was still the first punch that hit the opponent. How to hit the first punch? This was the answer that everyone wanted to know. However, Lance's combination punches were somewhat different. He was like a character in a fighting game. His moves were connected without any gaps, giving Zhou Wen no chance to counterattack. It even gave Zhou Wen the illusion that if he revealed any flaws and allowed him to land the first punch, Lance's subsequent attacks would rain down on him like a torrential storm, KOing him without giving him any chance to react. Zhou Wen pushed the Dragon Gate Fairy skill to its limits as he constantly dodged. His arms and legs were also blocking Lance's attack. Every time his arms and fists collided, Zhou Wen felt a terrifying force inundate him, causing his bones to groan in pain. What looked like ordinary punches, palms, kicks, and knees produced an effect that was as explosive as a primordial energy skill. This left Zhou Wen very alarmed. Soon, he realized that Lance's seemingly ordinary punches and kicks weren't really ordinary. It was really some kind of primordial energy art that had a powerful augmentation effect on all aspects of strength. Lance's every move was supported by different primordial energy skills. This was the first time Zhou Wen had seen someone who could fight in such a manner. Zhou Wen had only practiced primordial energy skills on his fists and palms, but he hadn't trained in other areas. All he could do was use the Lotus Flower Buddha body to forcefully protect himself. However, the defense of the Lotus Flower Buddha body still couldn't allow Zhou Wen to fight Lance head-on. Every time their bodies collided, Zhou Wen felt as though his bones were about to crack. All he could do was dodge with his movement technique. However, purely with his movement technique, he couldn't completely dodge Lance's crazy attack. With just a dozen or so punches, Zhou Wen fell into an absolute disadvantage. Duguchuan laughed when he saw this. You want to use your movement technique to dodge Lance's attacks and wait for Lance to expend his primordial energy? You're really too naive. This move might work on others, but it's useless against a freak like Lance. Back then, that was what I thought, but I ended up being brutally tortured. Xiaobing said faintly. Back then, in order to attack like a character in a fighting game, Lance specially learned a primordial energy art that could quickly recover his primordial energy. Furthermore, in order to reduce the expenditure of primordial energy, he specially found dozens of the most basic primordial energy skill crystals. Those primordial energy skills expended very little primordial energy. After learning them, he forcefully raised dozens of rank immortal primordial energy skills to rank 10 legendary through his own insights and practice. Not only is it extremely powerful, but it also consumes very little primordial energy. This is something that ordinary people wouldn't even dare dream of, but Lance only took 4 months to complete. If I had Lance's talent, I could be as willful as him. I could also not have a hero physique or learn my family's primordial energy art. I could also game all day like him, John said through gritted teeth. Although he was known as a saint of Covenant College, he knew very well that he was far inferior to the fellow who gamed all day in school. No matter how hard he worked, he didn't even have the right to be that fellow's match. Bam! When the fists collided, Zhou Wen felt a force penetrate his body and travel up his arm. It struck his organs as though they had suffered a heavy blow as he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Lance actually knew how to use a force that penetrated his body, but it wasn't as strong as Zhou Wen's ashen palm. Zhou Wen's eyes gradually turned serious. He had never encountered such an opponent before. Among his peers, no one had ever given him such pressure. Back then, although Jing had defeated him in one strike, it was an absolute difference in speed and strength brought about by the difference in level. Such a battle had nothing to do with Zhou Wen's abilities. Furthermore, Zhou Wen hadn't learned any combat techniques back then. This time it was different. Despite being at the same level, Zhou Wen felt immense pressure. This was something he had never felt before. Jiang Yan is right. Lance is much more terrifying than John. Zhou Wen's heart gradually burned with passion. Although he knew that defeating Lance wouldn't benefit him in any way, he wanted to win. He didn't want to lose. After all, Zhou Wen was only a 16 or 17-year-old youth. He couldn't completely control his young and competitive heart, especially when facing a peer like Lance. However, Zhou Wen had spent too much time practicing his primordial energy art in the past. His starting point was too low. He had used his golden years to practice ascetic meditation, but it was useless. In the end, it was replaced by the lost Immortal Sutra. After that, he kept gaming and grinding dungeons. His level and physique had increased, and he had obtained quite a number of primordial energy skills. It was enough to fight ordinary people, but against someone like Lance, it was still far from enough. Chapter 221. Zhou Wen calmed his heart. The more he was at this moment, the calmer he became. The Dragon Gate Fairy skill was pushed to its limits as he dodged like a ghost. From time to time, he would strike out to interrupt Lance's attack. It's still not enough. If my movement technique can be a little faster, if this mid-air turn can be a little more sudden, and the angle can be a little smaller. Zhou Wen constantly gained insights during the battle, and the realm of lifting lightness in heaviness was used more smoothly by Zhou Wen. 15 punches. He's still not using his companion beast? Duguchuan was somewhat surprised. Zhou Wen dodged and blocked Lance's 15 punches. It should be soon. In less than 10 punches, Zhou Wen will definitely use his companion beast. Otherwise, he will only be defeated. Xia Bing could also tell that Zhou Wen was almost at his limit. Lance's attacks became sharper and sharper, making Zhou Wen feel like he wasn't facing a person but a huge tsunami. He felt powerless to resist. Under such a terrifying attack, Zhou Wen could only constantly squeeze himself dry, making his every move more concise and efficient, just like what Lance was doing. It was impossible for him to use all sorts of primordial energy skills like Lance, so he could only bet everything on his movement technique to be faster, stronger, and more efficient. Even if it was a millimeter, he had to try his best to save as much time as possible. He didn't allow his body to make any unnecessary movements, squeezing out every bit of potential and possibility. The experience of dying countless times in-game was now very useful. This was because when the blood-colored avatar faced death, Zhou Wen could also feel it. Therefore, even in such a disadvantageous situation, he could still maintain his clarity of mind. His focus talent allowed him to focus wholeheartedly on the battle without any distracting thought. Gradually, Zhou Wen's movement technique exceeded the scope of the Dragon Gate Fairy skill and fused with Zhou Wen's unique style. Suddenly, Zhou Wen felt that Lance's attacks weren't that difficult to withstand. His movement trajectory seemed to be able to keep up with Lance's attack. Even if he didn't use his fists or palms to block, he could gradually dodge Lance's continuous attacks with pure movement technique. How can that be? Duguchuan widened his eyes as he looked at Zhou Wen. As a person who was proficient in all sorts of movement techniques, he had naturally studied a famous primordial energy skill like the Dragon Gate Fairy skill. He even knew it himself. Furthermore, his Dragon Gate Fairy skill wasn't lower than Zhou Wen's. However, Duguchuan had better movement techniques, so he rarely used the Dragon Gate Fairy skill. Previously, when Zhou Wen used the Dragon Gate Fairy skill, the method of switching between light and heavy left Duguchuan somewhat impressed. However, he was only impressed at Zhou Wen's ingenuity. He had actually used such a method to push the Dragon Gate Fairy skill to rank 10. However, it was only a compliment. He also had a rank 10 movement technique, and it was even better than Dragon Gate Fairy skill. However, he had only lasted less than 20 punches under Lance's hands. However, Zhou Wen's current movement technique clearly exceeded the scope of the Dragon Gate Fairy skill, but it had the foundation of the Dragon Gate Fairy skill. Duguchuan had seen similar movement techniques before. It was the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill possessed by the epic dimensional creature, Fairy. Although the Dragon Gate Fairy skill and the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill only had a one-word difference, the two were worlds apart. The Dragon Gate Fairy skill originated from the Fairy Monkey, but the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill was a true fairy technique. There was an insurmountable quality difference between the two. Zhou Wen was at the legendary stage, so it was impossible for him to learn the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill now. Furthermore, Zhou Wen's previous movement technique proved that he had never learned it before. However, Zhou Wen's current movement technique had traces of the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill. Without using primordial energy crystals, he can raise the Dragon Gate Fairy skill to the epic stage with just his combat experience and comprehension? Duguchuan's expression flickered. If raising in primordial energy skills comprehension to rank 10 was already something that only geniuses could do, then directly raising in primordial energy skill by a huge level, especially when one's level hadn't reached that level, was a little terrifying. Although Duguchuan wasn't willing to believe that Zhou Wen could do it to such an extent, Zhou Wen's movement technique was becoming more and more like the Dragon Gate Flying Immortal skill. That elegant and peerless posture was something that the Dragon Gate Fairy skill didn't possess. This person seems a little terrifying. Duguchuan suddenly had such a feeling. Xia Bing also looked at Zhou Wen in astonishment. She didn't know movement techniques as well as Duguchuan, but she could tell that Zhou Wen was dodging more and more easily. Lance's attacks seemed to be getting harder and harder to force him to block with his body. Zhou Wen's body was like a flying immortal. When Lance threw a punch, his fist was always 3 inches away from Zhou Wen's body, preventing him from hitting him. Zhou Wen seemed to be using the wind from the punch to move as he gracefully retreated in midair. Duguchuan wasn't wrong, but he wasn't completely right either. Zhou Wen's movement technique was indeed an imitation of a fairy's movement technique, but it wasn't an ordinary fairy's movement technique, but a mutated fairy's. He had fused the mutated fairy's movement technique he had seen into the Dragon Gate Fairy skill, causing it to gradually transform, almost forming a brand new movement technique. Old Zhou's movement technique is getting better, but why does this fellow like movement techniques so much? Isn't it better to fight head-on? Don't you think so? Li Xian clearly didn't appreciate Zhou Wen's style. He still preferred to fight head-on. And Sheng, who was sitting beside Li Xian, didn't say a word as he continued watching the battlefield. Qiao Xiyuan looked at the two from time to time and happened to see this scene. He couldn't help but frown. After some thought, Qiao Xiyuan asked Liz beside him, "Ask the guy who's monitoring Anxing if there's anything amiss on his end." Liz wasn't in a good mood when she saw that Zhou Wen was able to dodge Lance's attack. She said, "It should be fine. If there's anything, they would have reported it." "Then shall I let you be the minister?" Qiao Xiyuan's voice turned cold. When Liz met Qiao Xiyuan's cold gaze, her heart chilled. She hurriedly said, "Sorry, minister. I'll ask immediately." Liz didn't dare delay any further as she immediately contacted the surveillance personnel. After repeated confirmation, she told Qiao Xiyuan, "And Sheng hasn't done anything abnormal. He's been watching the competition." "Something's wrong." "What's wrong?" Qiao Xiyuan's expression didn't improve because of Liz's words. Just as Liz was about to say something, Qiao Xiyuan suddenly stood up and quickly left his seat. He walked to the other side of the spectator stands, directly opposite Li Xian and Anxing. Qiao Xiyuan stared at Anxing like an eagle. He kept sizing up Anxing's face, and the more he looked, the uglier his expression became. And Xing was wearing a trench coat and a hat, but he didn't deliberately lower his hat or wear sunglasses. His face looked a little like Xing's, but Qiao Xiyuan was certain that it wasn't Xing. Qiao Xiyuan's heart immediately turned cold. Chapter 222. Minister, what happened? Liz walked over as well and traced Qiao Xiyuan's gaze. She also recognized Xing, and after taking a look, she didn't see anything abnormal. I was too careless. That fellow only wore a hat without lowering the brim. He didn't wear glasses, revealing his entire face. It was to not arouse my suspicions. I should have thought of it. How can a person like Xing sit here and watch the competition in peace? Everyone, immediately report your location. Qiao Xiyuan was no longer in the mood to teach Liz. He directly gave the order over the comms. Everyone reported their locations, and Liz could hear them clearly through the earpiece. After everyone finished reporting, she said, "Minister, everyone is in their designated spots. Everything is normal. There's nothing abnormal. What's wrong with you?" Qiao Xiyuan's expression was as cold as ice. Ignoring Liz, Qiao Xiyuan directly said over the comms, "Xing, I know you're listening. Answer me." In the surveillance room of Little Lin's pet arena, Xing sat on a chair and looked at Qiao Xiyuan through the surveillance screen. The two inspectors beside him were like puppets, sitting there mechanically. Upon hearing the voice from the walkie-talkie, Xing said indifferently, "Speak." Liz imagined that Qiao Xiyuan had gone mad, but when she heard the voice over the comms, her expression immediately turned ugly. She wore a look of disbelief. "Don't hurt my people. The Bureau will not take any action while you are in the Holy Land," Qiao Xiyuan said after taking a deep breath. Killing an inspector in the Holy City was a heinous crime. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't dare do such a thing, but Qiao Xiyuan couldn't forget what Tianzhua had said back then. He also couldn't forget the scene of Xing crippling Liz without a second thought. The words Devil's Adjutant wasn't just a simple name. As long as Tianzhua gave the order, Xing would do anything. He was a lunatic. Don't be in such a hurry. Sit down and drink some water. This match is very exciting. Don't you want to finish watching it? Xing said as he looked at the surveillance screen. "Xing, if you dare hurt a single strand of their hair, I'll make it so that none of you can leave the Holy Land," Liz said angrily. "Shut up." Qiao Xiyuan suppressed his voice to stop Liz before sitting back in the spectator stands. He constantly sized up Little Lin's pet arena. He had to find Xing's location before the end of the match. That way, he would still have a chance of turning the tables. Suddenly, when he saw a camera on the arena, Qiao Xiyuan's eyes lit up. He got up and was about to leave his seat when Xing's voice sounded from the earpiece again. "Minister Qiao, it's best you sit there and don't move. From now on, with every step you take, an inspector will die. I wonder if the lives of these inspectors are enough for you to walk to the surveillance room. If it's enough, you can walk slowly. I'll sit here and wait for you to send me to prison. This is the Holy City. I can't run away anyway, right?" Gritting his teeth, Qiao Xiyuan returned to his seat and dejectedly said, "You win. Don't hurt them. Enjoy this battle. It looks like it will be very exciting," Xing said lightly. In the arena, Lance's eyes lit up like a gaming fan who had seen a classic game he had long wanted. He couldn't hide the smile on his lips. How interesting! Fighting games are indeed only interesting when there are opponents, Lance said as he stopped his attacks and looked at Zhou. "Sorry, I've said it before. I don't like fighting games. I don't know how it feels," Zhou said. However, Lance ignored Zhou and continued, "Do you know why I like playing games? It's because I can't find an opponent in real life, so I can only find fun in games. The rules and skills in the game restrict me, making me feel a little difficult. Unfortunately, a game is a game after all. There are still rules to be found. No matter how strong the mechanisms are, after playing for a long time and knowing the rules and patterns, I can still easily defeat them. This is why I don't want to know anything about Tianzua before meeting him. I'm afraid I'll discover his patterns. That way, even if I beat him, it would be very boring. Then you can try leveling up the game. There will always be stronger bosses waiting for you, Zhou said. So what if there are stronger bosses? It's just that their strength and skills are set to be stronger. In essence, they are no different from ordinary monsters. Powerful bosses are the same, but interesting souls have different charms. Lance stared at Zhou with a burning gaze and said, "It's been a long time since I had such a satisfying battle. It's you who made me find the joy of fighting again. I originally thought that this day would only come when I meet Tianzua. Actually, I prefer to grind those soulless bosses," Zhou said with a shrug. "No, you aren't that kind of person. Deep down, you are the same as me. You yearn for battle," Lance said as he relaxed his body. As he walked towards Zhou, he said, "Let me see where your limits are." With that said, Lance suddenly moved. However, this time, he didn't use consecutive skills like he did in-game. At the instant he moved, he left behind afterimages as he instantly appeared in front of Zhou. Zhou tapped the ground with his toes and quickly retreated. However, in the next second, the lance in front of him turned blurry. The real lance appeared above Zhou like a god that had descended to the mortal world. His fist came crashing down with terrifying battle aura. Even the evolved Dragon Gate fairy skill couldn't dodge the punch. Zhou condensed the great strength Vajra palm and used the 7 distribution palms sky propping pillar to meet Lance's fist. Boom! Battle aura exploded as the terrifying force caused Zhou legs to sink into the special rubber ground. Using the collision of forces, Lance's figure strangely borrowed strength in the air and instantly turned blurry, leaving behind an afterimage. His true body had already landed on the ground like a meteor, causing the ground to crack. At the same time, he threw another punch at Zhou. Zhou's legs sank into the ground, making it impossible for him to dodge. He switched his primordial energy art to Dao Body and used an astral suction palm to suck at Lance's fist. Immediately, Lance's fist deviated to the side as his body brushed past Zhou's shoulder. However, Lance's reaction was just too fast. In the blink of an eye, he used the momentum of his charge to twist his body and sweep his leg at Zhou's waist like a blade. The entire action was completed in an instant like a ghost. His primordial energy skills seemed to have broken through the rules of the legendary stage. Xia Bing looked at Lance in a daze, feeling an indescribable feeling. Duguchuan also smiled bitterly inwardly. Lance had gone further than they imagined. In the past, he didn't seem to be serious when fighting them. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.